Hello everyone, I am Alex and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. I stood in the upstairs hallway of that old Victorian mansion with my lantern in hand, staring at the closed door of the room I had just rented. The smell of stale wood and wet plaster pressed against my nostrils. I hadn't even taken off my coat, but I could hear something inside the walls. It was the first night, and the place already felt wrong. I couldn't see anyone around, yet I sensed I wasn't alone. My hands felt clammy, and my mouth tasted bitter. I focused on the door's brass handle and pushed it open, uncertain and tense, not knowing what I might find on the other side. I'm a middle-aged man, a researcher of strange phenomena. I don't rely on stories or rumors. I trust my own recordings and notes. That's why I came here. This old Victorian house, tucked behind thick trees at the end of a dead-end road, has a reputation. Local talk suggests it's been the scene of events no one can explain. I found it through a newspaper listing. The owner didn't say much, just collected the money and handed me the key. The hallways are dark, the floor creaks. The light fixtures look ready to fall. The wallpaper peels in some places. My room is on the second floor, next to a small storage closet with a locked door. The landlord insisted I stay on the second floor, saying it had the quietest room. I had no reason to argue. My room is small. It has a single bed, a plain wooden desk, a worn rug, and a closet that smells like old blankets. The walls have no art or decoration. The lantern I carry is my own. There's an overhead light bulb, but it flickers and hums. I can barely stand the sound. I place my bag on the bed. The floorboards respond with a dull creak. I try to ignore it. I check the windows. The glass is dirty. I can see the outline of trees outside and the faint glow of a distant streetlight. Inside, the silence seems too heavy. I shut the door and test the lock. It works, but the sound of the lock turning feels loud in my ears. I stand still and listen. I hear low murmurs inside the walls. I lean close to the wooden panels and wait. There's a gentle scratching sound as if something is trapped. I tap the wall with my knuckle. The murmurs stop. I don't hear rats. It doesn't sound like pipes. It sounds like voices, muffled and distant. I put my ear against the wall and hold my breath. There's a low sound, not a word I can understand, just a soft hum. I step back, breathe out, and decide to unpack. I take out my tape recorder and place it on the desk. I set it to record and leave it running, hoping to capture these sounds. I need evidence. I take a flashlight from my bag and shine it along the floor and ceiling. The ceiling has dark stains. The wood panels in the ceiling look uneven. I feel a draft. The air tastes musty. I swallow and rub my arms. My skin feels clammy. Before sleeping, I stand by the door and listen to the hallway. I hear nothing. I open the door and step out. The corridor is quiet. The old floor groans under my weight. There's a single dim light bulb dangling from a cord near the staircase. I walk toward it and look down. The staircase leads to the foyer, where a dusty chandelier hangs. I don't see anyone. There's no caretaker in sight. The house seems empty. I return to my room and lock the door again. I sit on the bed and remove my shoes. The sheets smell stale, but they seem clean enough. I turn off the lantern and lie down, keeping the flashlight close. I can't sleep. The murmurs begin again, coming from the wall behind the desk. I sit up and turn on the flashlight. The sound stops. I get out of bed and move the desk a few inches from the wall. I run my fingers over the wooden paneling, feeling for gaps. It feels smooth and solid. I wait a few minutes, then kill the light again. The murmurs resume. I turn on the flashlight quickly. Nothing. I rub the back of my neck. My heart is beating faster. I feel sweat under my arms. My throat is dry. I try to swallow quietly. I want to understand what's happening, but I have no explanation. My mouth tightens. I breathe through my nose and try to stay calm. Eventually, I manage to sleep for a few hours. In the morning, the hallway is still empty. I find the bathroom. It has weak lighting and a mirror with a crack. I wash my face with cold water and brush my teeth. I return to my room and play back the tape. At first, I hear only my movements and creaks. Then I hear murmurs. They are faint but present. The sounds resemble whispers. Maybe 2 or 3 voices. I cannot make out words. I rewind and listen again. Nothing clear, just a low, continuous murmur. I note the time on my notepad. I spend the day exploring the mansion. I find a kitchen downstairs. The counters are old, with a faint smell of something sour. The refrigerator hums. I open it. It has a few items, mostly spoiled. I close it. I check a sitting room. It has a large armchair, a bookshelf, and a fireplace. Dust covers everything. I pick a random book. It has a torn cover and blank pages stuck together by mold. I put it back. I hear nothing but my own footsteps. I try to find the owner. I walk around calling out. No one responds. I find a door at the end of a hallway on the first floor, locked and bolted. I try to turn the knob. It does not budge. Back upstairs, I stand in my room again and look at the walls. I see no cracks. The murmurs came from inside. I open the closet. It is empty except for a thick smell of mothballs. I tap the walls inside the closets. They are solid. I lift the rug and see stained floorboards. I press my ear against the floor. It's silent. I step onto a chair and look at the ceiling. Nothing unusual, just old wood and uneven joints. That night, I sit at the desk with my lantern off. I hold the flashlight in my hand, ready to switch it on. The tape recorder is running. The murmurs start around midnight, soft and steady. My shoulders tense. I feel goosebumps on my arms. The murmurs seem to come from all sides now. I feel something brush the back of my neck. I jerk around. My flashlight beam hits the ceiling. I see a vague, shifting silhouette. It moves along the wooden panels, then vanishes. I feel a pounding in my chest. My breathing is shallow. I force myself to stare at the spot where I saw it. Nothing is there now. I stand up and walk slowly to the center of the room. The floor creaks under my feet. I feel as if something stands behind me. I spin around. The flashlight shows only the empty bed and desk. I try to calm down. I grit my teeth. My hand holding the flashlight shakes. I step toward the wall where the murmurs are loudest. I press my hand against the wood. It feels cool. Then I feel something push back. Not a strong push, just a gentle pressure. I pull my hand away and stumble back, knocking my knee against the desk. The desk rattles. The tape recorder falls, and I scramble to pick it up. The murmurs stop. I spend the rest of the night sitting on the bed, flashlight on, staring at the ceiling and walls. My eyes burn from not blinking enough. I keep thinking I see shapes moving just out of sight. Each time I turn, they are gone. Once I see a slow, dark shape sliding across the floor. I rush toward it, bending down, but it disappears. The smell of mold is stronger at night. I feel it burning my nose. I cough and wipe my face with my sleeve. In the morning, I check my tape again. I hear murmurs. Faint but clear, my own breathing in gasps. The sound of the desk rattling. I have proof that something is happening. I decide to stay at least another night, wanting to see if these shapes respond to anything I do. I take notes on everything. I measure the temperature with a small thermometer. It's a bit colder near the walls. I try tapping in a pattern to see if the murmurs react. Nothing changes. The house remains quiet during the day, no matter what I do. I go downstairs and look for any paperwork or records. I find nothing useful, just old furniture and dusty corners. I try the locked door again. It remains locked. I walk outside around the mansion. The lawn is overgrown. The paint on the outside walls chipped. I see a few boarded up windows. I listen, but I hear only distant traffic and wind. The place feels deserted. I return inside and lock myself in my room, preparing for another night. That evening, I position myself in the hallway. I turn off all lights and stand near my door, listening. I hear creaking of wood. I slide my hand along the wall. It's smooth but feels damp. I lift my lantern and light it. The flame flickers. I notice the reflection of something at the far end of the corridor, near the storage closet. I take a few steps forward. The boards flex under my feet. I see a shape near the closet door. It looks like a dark lump on the ceiling, clinging there. I hold my breath. My heart thumps hard. I approach slowly, keeping my lantern up. The shape drifts toward the corner where the ceiling meets the wall. I walk closer. I feel sweat trickling down my face. When I reach the spot, it's gone. I run my hand over the wood, feeling for any difference. It is just wood, old and dry. I return to my room and close the door. leaving it unlocked this time. I don't want to waste time unlocking it if I have to move quickly. I sit on the bed. The murmurs begin again, low and steady. I feel a presence behind me. I turn, shining the flashlight on the wall. Nothing. I feel a light pressure on my shoulder. I spin around, flailing my arm. I hit only air. My breathing gets heavier. My chest feels tight. I can taste sweat on my upper lip. I clench my fists and stand up. I walk along the wall, tapping lightly. The murmurs pause, then continue. I say, "Is anyone there?" My voice sounds weak. I get no response, just the same low whispers. I try pressing my ear against the wall again. The murmurs sound like voices, but I can't understand them. They rise and fall, never forming clear words. I speak again louder. "I can hear you. What do you want?" No response. I feel a cold spot near my left hand. I turn my flashlight there. The beam cuts through dusty air, revealing nothing. I feel a brush against my ankle. I jump back, nearly dropping the flashlight. The smell of mold intensifies. My skin itches. I scratch my neck and feel dampness on my collar. My muscles ache from tension. Hours pass. I sit at the desk, trying to remain calm. The murmurs do not stop. I see shapes along the walls and ceilings, small and shifting. They move when I'm not looking directly at them. Every time I turn, they vanish. My stomach hurts. I haven't eaten much. I force down some crackers from my bag. I drink some water. I rub my eyes and press my fingers into my temples. The whispers continue, steady and low, like background noise that never ends. I feel trapped in this room, as if the house itself is pressing in on me. I decide to try something else. I set my tape recorder on the floor in the center of the room. I turn off my flashlight and lantern. I sit in the darkness, waiting. After a few minutes, my eyes adjust. I see faint shapes flickering above me. The floor creaks softly. My skin prickles. I hear a gentle tapping inside the walls. The murmurs move around the room, sometimes to my left, sometimes above, sometimes behind the desk. I try to follow the sound, but it shifts before I can identify a source. I feel something touch my shoulder again, this time with a gentle pressure, like a fingertip. I jerk away and stand up, arms raised, ready to push away anything physical. There's nothing. My breathing is loud in my ears. I walk to the door. I consider leaving right now, but I stop. I want more proof. I switch on the lantern and grab the tape recorder. I rewind it and play it back. I hear my own breathing, and beneath that, the low whispers. They're clearer now. I can hear a soft rise and fall of tones, but no real words. I feel a sensation of frustration. I want to understand. By the fourth night, I am exhausted. My back hurts from sleeping in a tense position. My eyes are bloodshot. I keep hearing the murmurs every night, feeling these invisible touches on my shoulders and arms. Sometimes I wake up gasping, certain something was standing next to me. I jump out of bed, shining my flashlight all around. Nothing is there. The smell of mold never leaves. The floor never stops creaking. I have recorded hours of whispers, but they give me no answers. During the day, the mansion remains quiet and empty. I walk through every room I can access. I knock on walls, look into corners, try every door. Many doors are locked. The owner never shows up. There are no other tenants I can find. At one point, I try shouting through the house, calling out for anyone. I get no response, only the dull echo of my own voice. I feel hungry and tired. The stress of the nights wears on me. My hands shake when I hold the flashlight. My breath catches whenever I enter my room. I no longer trust what I see. On the fifth night, I try sleeping with the lantern on. The silhouettes appear anyway, flickering at the edges of the light. I reach out trying to touch them, but I grab only air. The murmurs keep me awake. I feel something brushing against my face. I recoil, pressing my back against the wall, staring at the empty space in front of me. I realize I cannot stay here. I have enough recordings. I have felt these strange touches. I have seen shifting silhouettes. I have smelled the mold and heard the whispers. Nothing in my notes helps me explain it. I do not need more. I pack my bag, stashing the tapes in my recorder. My movements feel shaky. My heart beats too fast. My throat is dry. My palms sweat. I open my door and walk into the hallway. It is early morning now, and the first light filters through a grimy window at the end of the corridor. I move slowly, trying not to look at the shadows on the walls. As I reach the staircase, I hear a gentle murmuring behind me. I do not turn around. I feel something brush my shoulder. I keep walking. The floorboards creak. I grip the railing so tight my knuckles hurt. I descend each step, feeling the weight of the house above me. When I reach the bottom, I cross the foyer, unlock the front door, and step outside. The air outside smells cleaner. The morning light hurts my eyes. I stand there for a moment, catching my breath. My hands are shaking, and my legs feel weak. But I am outside now, and the door is behind me. I have seen enough. I do not know what was in that house. I only know what I heard, saw, and felt, and none of it makes sense. I walk away, leaving the old Victorian mansion and its dark murmurs behind me. I remember the first time I noticed something in my bedroom mirror. It happened a few weeks ago, late in the afternoon, just before the sun went down. I walked into my bedroom, stood in front of the old mirror on the wall, and saw something behind me. There was no confusion. I saw a tall, thin shape wrapped in a dark cloak. When I turned around, the room was empty. My apartment sits on the top floor of a building that has been around for decades. Maybe more than a century. The walls are thick, and the hallways outside my door are narrow and always a bit dim. The paint on the stairwell peels in places, and the floorboards creak. My place is only one bedroom, one bathroom, a small kitchen, and a living room that doubles as a dining area. The furniture is old and plain. I spend most evenings alone, listening to the pipes hiss or the distant hum of the other tenants' appliances. There's a faint, musty smell in the halls. Dust gathers fast. I keep my windows closed because the frames are warped and don't fit well, letting in drafts and noise. I've never had problems with my mirror before. I bought it cheap from a secondhand shop. It's about as tall as my chest and framed in simple wood. It hangs at eye level on the wall opposite my bed. I use it to check my face in the morning to see if my shirt is wrinkled. That kind of thing. I never thought twice about it. It was just another old object in a place filled with old things. That changed on that first evening when I saw the figure behind me. I didn't panic at first. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The sun was setting, and the light in the hallway was odd. And maybe I caught a reflection of something outside, but I saw it again the next evening. This time I stood still and stared into the mirror, waiting to see if the figure would move. It didn't, but it was clearer than before. It stood there tall and thin, wearing that dark cloak, or robe. I couldn't see a face. It was just a shape. I could feel a warm pulse in my temples, and a dull ache in my stomach. My hands felt cold, even though the apartment wasn't cold. When I turned around that second time again, the room was empty. I looked under the bed, inside the closet, behind the door, and checked the hallway. I saw nobody. Still, every time I looked in the mirror that evening, that figure was behind me, standing in the background. I tried turning the lights on. The overhead lamp is a cheap bulb that throws a harsh glow around the room. The figure was still there. I tried shining a small flashlight at the mirror. The figure didn't vanish. I left the room, came back, and it remained. But it only appeared late in the day, around the same time, never in the morning or early afternoon. Over the next few days, I realized something. Each evening, the figure was a little closer to me in the reflection. The first time it had been several feet behind me near the door. After a few days, it stood about halfway between the door and me. A few days later, it was right behind me, maybe an arm's length away. I could see the outline of its shoulders, the way its cloak draped down, almost touching the floor. I couldn't see feet, hands, or a face. It never moved while I watched, but each new evening, it somehow started out closer. I tried not looking in the mirror, but I ended up checking anyway. My curiosity and fear wouldn't let me ignore it. It made it hard to sleep. I would turn off the lights at night and keep thinking about it. Then I turn them back on and check again. There it was, always behind me. One night I tried covering the mirror with a blanket. I used some old tape to hold the blanket in place. The next day I lifted the blanket at dusk. The figure was still behind me in the reflection, now so close that I could almost feel it breathing on my neck. In fact, I did feel something. It was like a faint, warm breath hitting the back of my neck. My skin got goosebumps. My heart started pounding hard enough that I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I tried to swallow, but my mouth was dry. I said out loud, "What do you want?" I got no answer. It didn't move or speak. It just stood there. I tried stepping away from the mirror. I moved to the side. The figure remained behind me in the reflection, always at the same distance. It wasn't tied to a spot in the room. It stayed behind me wherever I moved, as long as I kept my eyes on the mirror. One night I tried not looking at the mirror at all. I sat in the living room and ignored it, but I couldn't stop thinking about what would happen if I let it get any closer. The apartment felt too quiet. My stomach had a strange knot that wouldn't loosen. My muscles felt tense, and my forehead was damp with sweat. The air seemed stale. I kept hearing faint clicks in the distance, like tiny pieces of wood snapping. I couldn't tell if it was the old building settling or something else. I paced around the living room. I looked at the clock. Eventually I got up, walked into the bedroom, and faced the mirror again. The figure was right behind me. I could feel a faint vibration in the air. I noticed my reflection looked different. My eyes seemed strained, and my shoulders were hunched forward. The figure was taller than me by at least a head. Its cloak looked heavier than before. I still couldn't see its face. The hood was always down, covering everything above the shoulders. I heard something new, a dry, crackling sound. It reminded me of stiff joints bending or some kind of brittle material being flexed. The sound came from behind the glass, but I felt it in my bones. My heart was racing. My breathing was shallow. My neck felt stiff. The hair on my arms stood up. I leaned in closer to the mirror to see if I could catch any detail of its face. I saw nothing, just darkness inside that hood. But the breathing sound was there. Slow, steady breaths that matched my own pace, but felt heavier. I reached out and touched the surface of the mirror. It felt normal, smooth, solid glass, with a room temperature finish. The figure didn't react. It didn't grab me or pull me in, but it felt like it wanted to. I sensed that somehow. The next evening I tried something different. I took the mirror off the wall. It was easy. It just hung there from a small nail. I turned it around, facing the wall so I wouldn't see my reflection. Then I sat down on the bed and waited. I listened to the sounds outside, a car passing far below, a neighbor closing a door down the hallway, the distant hum of a refrigerator. After about an hour, I slowly turned the mirror around. The figure stood behind me again, closer than ever. It was so close that if I tilted my head back in the reflection, I'd be resting against its chest. I could see the edges of its cloak near my shoulders. I turned around in real life. Nothing was there, just my empty room. But the feeling of something behind me wouldn't go away. I could almost feel a slight pressure on my back, as if I were leaning into a presence that wasn't there. I tried to smash the mirror. I lifted it and slammed it against the wooden bed frame. The glass was thick and didn't shatter. I hit it again, harder this time. I just ended up denting the frame and scratching the wood. The mirror held strong. I considered using a hammer from my small toolbox, but something stopped me. I can't explain it. I felt uneasy. My hands shook, and my chest felt tight. My brain kept telling me that if I broke the mirror, something worse might happen. I know it sounds stupid, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Over the next few nights, I tried to sleep without looking at the mirror. I turned it toward the wall and left it that way. But I could still feel something behind me in the room, even when I wasn't looking. I would wake up in the middle of the night, my heart pounding. I'd feel sweat on my forehead and back. I'd hear those strange clicking sounds in the darkness. I even tried moving the mirror to the living room. I placed it behind my couch, facing the wall, but at dusk, I couldn't help myself. I pulled the couch aside, turned the mirror around, and looked. The figure was still there, always behind me, always slightly closer, always breathing softly. I considered leaving the apartment. I went out during the day to get some fresh air. I stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the old building. I thought about staying in a hotel or crashing on a friend's couch. But I have nowhere else to go right now. I have no close friends nearby, no family members who would understand this situation. I don't want to explain that a strange figure is appearing behind me in the mirror. It sounds insane. Also, I can't afford a long hotel stay. So I went back upstairs and tried to think of another solution. I tried setting up a camera. I have a cheap digital camera. I placed it on my dresser, facing the mirror. I recorded a video of myself standing in front of the mirror at dusk. When I played it back, I saw only me standing alone. No figure was visible. The reflection showed only me in the empty room behind me. But when I looked at the mirror in real time, I could see the figure. The camera didn't capture it. I tried taking photos with my phone. The photos looked normal. No figure was visible. This didn't help my nerves. It only made me feel more isolated. I can still feel it getting closer each evening. It never disappears. It just waits. Some evenings I hear a slight dragging sound, like heavy fabric moving against a rough surface. I check the mirror and I can see the cloak shifting a bit around the figure's shoulders. I hear those dry clicks again, like knuckles popping. I feel my pulse in my throat. My legs feel weak. My stomach churns. My fingers tremble. I tried talking to it again. I said, "Can you hear me?" I got no reply. The figure doesn't speak. I tried holding a piece of paper in front of the mirror that said, "Who are you?" It changed nothing. I tried turning all the lights off and using a flashlight to see if it would vanish in total darkness. It didn't. The figure stayed behind me in the reflection, as solid as ever, even if I shined the light directly on the glass. One night I felt a sudden warmth on the back of my neck. It wasn't just a breath this time. It felt like someone's warm hand hovering near my skin, not touching but radiating heat. I could smell a faint odor, which reminded me of old wool or damp fabric left in a closet for too long. The scent made me cough, and my eyes watered as I backed away from the mirror. When I looked again, the figure was still there, unmoving and unchanged. I thought about leaving the mirror somewhere far away, maybe taking it down to the dumpster in the alley. But I worry that if I get rid of it, I'll just see the figure in any reflective surface. My bathroom's small medicine cabinet mirror, the metal surfaces in my kitchen that reflect a bit of my shape, or even the glass in my windows at night. I don't want to risk spreading this thing around my apartment. At least now it's contained to one mirror. The figure never touches me. It never lunges forward. It never shows a face. But it's getting so close that I can almost feel its presence with my eyes closed. Sometimes I stand in front of the mirror with my back facing it, and I don't even have to look. I know it's there. My back tingles, my scalp prickles, and my breathing becomes uneven. I don't know what will happen when it finally closes the gap, but each night I see it inch closer, or at least sense it. It never leaves me alone. The tension in my muscles never relaxes. I feel tired all the time, but I can't sleep well. My dreams are confusing, and I wake up disoriented and dizzy. One evening, I tried putting a chair between me and the mirror. I dragged a small wooden chair and stood behind it, looking into the mirror, hoping it would block the figure. But in the reflection, the figure stood behind me, not behind the chair. It made no difference. I tried to trick it by standing at an angle, but it didn't help. Wherever I stood, it stayed behind me. I stopped talking to neighbors. I stopped listening to music or turning on the TV. I just listened to the quiet of the apartment now, waiting for dusk, waiting for that figure to appear. Sometimes I think I hear it whispering, but when I focus, the sound is gone. I try not to blink when I stare at the mirror. I don't know what might happen if I close my eyes for too long. I'm not sure how much closer it can get. Lately, it's so close that I feel something brush against the back of my shirt in the reflection. I feel a slight tug at the fabric, like a loose thread being played with. My shoulders feel heavy when I stand there. My knees feel weak. My arms shake. My throat is tight, and my vision blurs at the edges from stress. I don't know if this figure plans to step out from behind the mirror. I don't know if it wants something. I'm not sure if it even knows I'm here, or if it's just some kind of echo caught in the glass. But I do know that it's here every evening, closer each time, breathing quietly, clicking and shifting behind me, not leaving me alone, not letting me rest. Tonight I stand here again. The light outside is fading. The mirror hangs on the wall, waiting. I know what I'll see. I can already feel that warm breath on my neck, the strange stiffness in my limbs, the tension that never goes away. The figure is behind me, and I can't stop it from getting closer. I can only stand here, watch, and feel it breathing down my neck, waiting for whatever comes next. I turned off the engine in front of the small coastal inn. My legs felt stiff from hours on the road. The place looked clean enough, a white building with chipped paint and a single wooden sign near the door. I didn't have big plans. I wanted a room, a bed, maybe some dinner, and then a full night of sleep. That was all I wanted. I climbed the few steps to the entrance and walked inside. The lobby smelled like salted fish and old furniture. The owner stood behind a narrow desk. He was in his 50s, wearing a short-sleeved shirt and old pants. He didn't smile. He asked my name and how many nights I would stay. I said just one, maybe two, depending on how I felt in the morning. He handed me a key and pointed to a narrow staircase. I didn't ask many questions. I just wanted to settle down and rest. I carried my bag up the stairs. The corridor was quiet, with dim light from a single bulb and a cheap fixture. My room was at the far end. Inside, there was a bed, a small table, a single chair, a thin curtain over a window, and a wooden door to a tiny bathroom. The sheets looked washed, but worn out. The floor squeaked when I walked. I left my bag beside the bed, opened the window a bit, and looked outside. The sky was gray. There were rocks beyond a short stretch of sand. The ocean made a steady noise. I could see some fishing boats far out on the horizon. I didn't see anyone nearby. The beach looked empty. I closed the window and lay down on the bed. I thought I would sleep right away, but my stomach felt empty, so I got up again and went downstairs. The owner pointed me to a small dining area near the lobby. He served me a piece of fish and some boiled potatoes. I tasted the fish. It was bland but fresh. He left me alone. I ate, drank some water, and then went back upstairs. The hallway was silent. My door was at the end. I locked it and turned off the light. Outside, the sound of the ocean didn't stop. I felt tired. I closed my eyes. I woke up hours later. It was dark. I hadn't checked my watch, but it felt like the middle of the night. I had no reason to wake up, but something had disturbed me. I lay still and listened. The wind made a soft noise and the waves made a steady sound. Then I heard a faint movement in the corridor. It was not loud. It sounded like bare feet on the floor. Wet feet made a subtle slapping sound, as if someone was walking slowly outside my door. I waited. The steps continued, paused near my door, and then stopped. I tried to ignore it. I tried to relax. Then the door rattled. Not a lot, just a slight tremble. The lock held, but I felt the wood vibrate. My heart beat faster. I sat up and stared at the door, waiting for it to happen again. After a few seconds, I heard nothing else. I listened for any other noise. I heard quiet steps moving away down the hall, then silence. I got out of bed and approached the door. I put my ear against it. Nothing. I unlocked it and opened it a crack. The hallway was empty. The light bulb was still on. The floor looked dry. I saw no footprints. I sniffed the air. It smelled normal. I shrugged, locked the door again, and felt unsettled, but tried to sleep. It took me a while, but eventually I drifted off. In the morning I woke up tired. My neck felt stiff. The sunlight came in around the curtain. I rubbed my eyes and got dressed. I went downstairs. The owner was there, wiping a counter. I told him I had heard someone in the corridor late at night. He shrugged. Maybe it was someone in another room. I asked if there were other guests. He said yes, one or two. I didn't see anyone else around though. I let it go. I spent the morning walking along the beach. I passed a few old houses and saw a small harbor with some fishing boats. The people I saw didn't smile or greet me. They didn't seem interested in a stranger. I stopped near some rocks and looked out at the ocean. The water was calm. I saw nothing unusual. After a while, I felt hungry and returned to the inn. I ate a simple lunch in my room, some bread and cheese I had with me. I didn't feel like talking to the owner. I tried to read a magazine I had in my bag. The afternoon passed slowly. I considered leaving, but I was tired of driving and I wanted at least one more full night's sleep before heading on. I decided to stay another night. I had a small dinner in the dining area. No one else ate there. The owner served me fish again, this time with some hard bread. I ate quickly and went back to my room. I locked the door and checked the window. I could hear the ocean. I sat on the chair and looked outside. That was when I noticed someone on the rocks. It was a single figure standing still. I could see a man-shaped form. The person wore no visible clothing, or maybe something too thin to see from a distance. He stood facing my window. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I saw something reflecting light where his eyes should be. The tide was low and the rocks were wet. He stood there without moving. I stared at him for a long time. My neck felt tense. My scalp felt cold. I looked away for a moment to see if anyone else was outside. When I looked back, the figure was still there. I didn't know what to do. It was too far to identify. I pulled the curtain closed and tried to ignore it. The floor squeaked under my feet as I paced. I felt uneasy and my stomach felt heavy. I decided to try and sleep early, hoping my fatigue would help me rest. That night I slept very lightly. I woke up again after midnight. The room was quiet. I heard the ocean outside. Then I heard those wet steps again in the corridor. They sounded heavier this time. I sat up in bed and listened. The steps came closer. They stopped right outside my door. The doorknob rattled once, twice. Then the door trembled, pushing against the lock. I got up, approached the door, and held the knob. The wood vibrated under my hand. I felt a slight push, like someone was testing the door, pressing against it without full force. I said, "Who is there?" No answer. I waited, holding my breath. The rattling stopped. The steps moved away. I heard the wet sounds fade down the hallway. I unlocked the door and opened it quickly, looking both ways. The corridor was empty again. No footprints, no water on the floor. Nothing. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it, breathing hard. My heart pounded. I felt sweat on my forehead. I turned on the bedside lamp and sat in the chair, watching the door. I stayed like that for a long time. Eventually, I tried to sleep again. This time I must have managed it near dawn because I woke up to weak morning light through the curtain. I decided I had enough. I would leave that morning. I got dressed, packed my bag, and went downstairs. I found the owner in the lobby. I told him I was checking out. He asked no questions, just took my money. I asked him if anyone else had reported strange noises at night. He shrugged and said no. I asked him if someone had tried to enter my room. He said he didn't know. He looked tired. I walked outside with my bag and went to my car. I put my bag in the trunk and closed it. Then I turned to look at the beach one last time. I saw that figure again, standing on the rocks, looking in my direction. The early sunlight made it easier to see him. His skin looked gray and damp. His eyes reflected light like tiny wet stones. I couldn't see any clear features on his face. His body looked lean, with no hair or clothes, just smooth skin with a dark tone. He didn't move. I felt my hands tremble as I searched my pockets for my keys. I got into the car and started the engine. I wanted to drive away and not look back, but I felt something hold me in place for a moment. I stared through the windshield at the empty street. No one stood there. The other houses looked closed. I looked again toward the rocks, but I couldn't see that figure anymore. The tide had risen, and the rocks were partly submerged. I saw only water in the top of one large rock. I began to drive out of town. The road was narrow and in poor condition. My arms felt tense on the steering wheel. My eyes felt itchy and dry. I thought about last night, the wet footsteps, the rattling door, the figure outside on the rocks. It all felt wrong. I tried to focus on the road. The car shook over some potholes. The engine sounded fine. I tried to push the thoughts out of my mind. After a few miles, I stopped at a small gas station, a single pump, an old man behind the counter, a bathroom that smelled like rust. I got some water and drank it. I thought about asking the old man if he knew anything about strange figures near the coast, but when I entered the shop, he looked at me with an empty stare. I decided it wasn't worth it. I paid for the water and left. Back in the car, I kept driving. The coastline stretched out on my right. I could see the ocean occasionally. It looked normal. There were no boats in the water, and I heard nothing unusual. The sound of the engine and the tires on the asphalt filled my ears, and I began to feel calmer. My heartbeat slowed down, and my shoulders relaxed a bit. I tried to understand what I had seen. Maybe it was just someone walking around at night, someone with wet shoes or no shoes at all, a local man who slept on the beach watching strangers from the rocks. Maybe the door rattling was just the wind, but I remembered the feeling of the wood under my hand, how it shook as if someone pressed on it. I remembered the eyes reflecting the light outside my window. I remembered no footprints and no water on the floor. I remembered the silence and the cold feeling on my neck. I decided I didn't care if I couldn't explain it. I just wanted to be away from that place. I wanted to reach a bigger town with more people, stay in a hotel with thick walls and brighter lights, and forget the shape of that figure's body, the sound of those steps, and the sudden trembling of the door at night. The road led me through some hills. I passed a few empty fields and some old barns. I kept my eyes on the asphalt. I didn't want to think about what was behind me. The sky looked clearer now. The sun was brighter. The car's air felt warmer. The smell of the sea faded as I moved inland. I stopped once more for a break, pulling over near a roadside diner. I drank some coffee and ate a sandwich. No one bothered me. I looked at my hands. They felt steadier now. My mind felt tired, but at least I was moving away. I got back in the car and continued to drive. By late afternoon, I saw more traffic on the road. I passed a few towns. I noticed people going about their day. No one paid attention to me. I like that. I checked the fuel gauge. I had enough to keep going. The events of last night stayed in my mind, but I didn't try to describe them to anyone. If someone asked, what would I say? That I heard strange steps and saw a weird figure who never spoke and never showed a clear face. That I locked my door and felt it shake at night, but found nothing outside. I realized I had no reason to tell anyone. It was over. I was gone, and that presence remained back in that small coastal town. I had no desire to return. I just wanted to reach a place where I could sleep without feeling that kind of tension. I wanted to feel safe. I wanted to close my eyes and hear only normal sounds. I didn't look back. I drove until the sun set again. I found a motel near a highway intersection. It looked simple, but better than that the clerk gave me a key without asking many questions. I parked, took my bag, and entered my room. It smelled dusty but harmless. I locked the door, turned on the light, and sat on the bed. I listened. I heard no water dripping, no footsteps. I felt no shaking. I took a long breath and closed my eyes. I wanted to sleep. I wanted to forget everything I had seen and heard. I lay down, turned off the lamp, and waited. Nothing happened. I stayed awake for a while, just to be sure. I heard cars passing outside, a distant television, some muffled voices, nothing else. I pulled the blanket over my chest. I tried to relax my shoulders. My heart rate slowed down. Eventually I fell asleep. I arrived at the cabin late in the afternoon, just before sunset. I was tired from the long drive and the steep climb through the mountain roads. The cabin stood in a small clearing, surrounded by tall pines and uneven ground. The walls looked old and needed repair. The wooden door creaked when I pushed it open, and the hinges felt loose. Inside, the furniture was basic. There was a small cot with a thin mattress in one corner, a wooden table and 2 chairs in the center, and a fireplace on the far wall. The windows were small and had old, dusty curtains. I dropped my backpack near the door and set my lantern on the table. My plan was simple. I wanted peace. I wanted to clear my head and find some inspiration. I brought along a notebook and a few pencils. I didn't expect much. I just wanted quiet. I locked the door from the inside and tested the windows. They seemed to close properly, though they rattled if I pushed too hard. I unpacked some basic supplies: canned food, a few bottles of water, matches, a flashlight, extra batteries, and a folding knife. The place smelled like old wood and damp earth. The silence outside was complete, except for the distant rustling of leaves when the wind picked up. I ate a cold meal from a can and tried to relax. I sat at the table and wrote a few notes. Nothing came to mind. My thoughts were blank and heavy. After a while, darkness settled in. I turned on the lantern and placed it near the window so I could see outside. I noticed that when I looked out, I couldn't see very far. The trees were too close together, and the darkness between them looked solid. The sound of branches shifting in the wind came and went. Sometimes I thought I heard something else, a low murmur or a faint whisper. I ignored it and focused on my writing, but I couldn't get into a rhythm. I kept looking up at the window. Around midnight, I heard a clear whisper outside. It was soft and short, like someone exhaling words. I stood up and approached the window. I pressed my ear against the glass. I couldn't make out the words, if there were any. I grabbed the flashlight, switched off the lantern, and opened the door a crack. Outside, I shone the flashlight around the clearing. The light reflected on tree trunks and patches of grass. The wind moved the branches and shadows shifted. I didn't see anyone. The whispering stopped. I closed the door and locked it again. A few hours later, I heard it again. This time it was closer. I wasn't sure if it was a voice or just the wind, but it sounded too steady to be random. My heart started pounding. I grabbed the flashlight again and went to the window facing the sound. The glass was old and had a slight fog on it. I could feel sweat forming under my shirt. I wiped my face and tried to breathe quietly. I shone the flashlight out the window. At first I saw nothing, just twisted branches and uneven ground. Then I noticed something standing between 2 trees. It was a figure tall and thin with long arms and legs. Its eyes reflected the light in a strange way. They looked clear and glassy. The figure didn't move. It stayed still. I couldn't see its face in detail. I just saw the eyes in the shape of a head. It looked human, but not quite right. My throat felt dry. I didn't say anything. I just kept the flashlight on it. After a few seconds, it stepped back into the darkness. I lost sight of it. I spent the rest of the night sitting against the wall holding the flashlight and my knife. I didn't sleep. I listened for more sounds, but everything stayed quiet. In the early morning, when a pale light came through the windows, I got up and checked outside again. I walked around the cabin with the flashlight and found something strange. On the windows, there were handprints made of mud. They were arranged in some kind of pattern. It didn't look random. It looked like they were placed in rows and circles, forming a symbol I didn't recognize. I touched one of the handprints. The mud was dry and cracked. I didn't know how this was possible without me hearing it happen. Someone or something had put these here while I was inside. I looked around the clearing. No footprints, no broken twigs, just those handprints on the glass. I tried to wipe them off, but they stuck. I had to use a wet rag and scrub. Even then, they left faint stains. The rest of that day, I tried to keep myself calm. I told myself maybe it was some local playing a prank. I told myself I should ignore it, focus on my writing, but I couldn't write. I kept checking the windows. I thought about leaving, but I had come a long way, and I didn't want to give up so easily. I decided to stay one more night and see if it happened again. Maybe I could confront whoever was out there. Before sunset, I collected some heavy rocks and placed them near the door. I closed and locked all the windows, and the door. I tested the lock on the door twice. I tried to eat, but my stomach was too tight. I drank some water and paced around the cabin. As darkness fell, I lit the lantern and put it on the floor near the fireplace. So the light was dim and not easy to spot from outside. I sat near the window with the flashlight off, waiting. I could hear my own breathing. Time passed slowly. My back hurt from leaning against the wall. After a few hours, I heard faint scratching outside. It sounded like fingernails on wood. The noise came from the back of the cabin. I got up quietly and approached that wall. I leaned my ear against it. The scratching was steady, like something was dragging its nails across the boards. The sound made me clench my teeth. I backed away and grabbed the flashlight. I didn't want to open the door and walk around the cabin in the dark. Instead, I tried to spot something through the window. The angle was bad, but I could see part of the back wall if I leaned out. I waited a minute, then decided to open the door and check. I held the flashlight and knife and stepped outside. The night air was cold. My breath came out in short bursts. I walked slowly around the cabin, keeping the flashlight pointed at the walls. When I reached the back, I saw scratch marks on the boards. They weren't deep, but they were fresh. The wood was slightly damp, and I could see thin flakes where it had been scraped. I turned the flashlight toward the trees and saw the tall figure again. It stood about 10 feet away near the edge of the clearing. Its eyes reflected the flashlight beam. I could see it more clearly now. It had very pale skin and long, thin arms. I couldn't see any clothes, but the darkness made it hard to tell. It didn't move. I raised the knife and shouted, "Who are you? What do you want?" My voice came out rough and strained. The figure made no sound. It turned and stepped behind a tree. I hurried forward a few steps, shining the light around the trunk. There was nothing there. No sound of steps. I scanned the area with the flashlight. Nothing. Just branches and darkness. I backed away, keeping the knife raised, and returned to the cabin. I locked myself in and pushed the table against the door. The rest of the night passed slowly. The scratching returned after a while, this time from a different wall. I didn't go outside again. I just stood there holding the flashlight, waiting. The scratching stopped, and started several times. Sometimes I heard that faint whispering, like a low voice just outside. I could make out words. My heart kept pounding. I wiped sweat from my forehead. I felt cramped and tired. I wanted to run, but I couldn't see well in the dark. I was afraid I would get lost in the forest. I decided to wait until morning. When the first light of dawn came, the sound stopped. I removed the table and went outside again. I circled the cabin and saw scratch marks on 3 sides of it. They were all similar, thin, uneven lines across the wooden boards. I also noticed new mud handprints on the windows. They formed another strange pattern, larger this time, covering almost the entire surface of one window. The mud smelled like wet soil. I spent hours scrubbing the windows again. I felt anger and fear. I looked around the clearing, searching for any clue. I found none. No footprints, no broken branches, just these signs. My hands shook while I cleaned. That day I gathered wood and planned to barricade the windows from inside. I found some old planks stacked behind the cabin. I nailed them across the inside of each window, leaving only small gaps so I could peek outside. It took a while since I'm not skilled with tools. I also placed a heavy rock in front of the door. I decided I would leave first thing in the morning if anything happened again. But I didn't care about my plans anymore. I just wanted to get out safely. As evening came, I sat on the cot holding the flashlight and the knife. The lantern was lit, but turned low. The cabin felt smaller now that I had blocked the windows. The air smelled like dust and old wood. My back hurt from all the work, and my stomach growled, so I ate some cold canned beans, chewing slowly and listening. Outside, the wind moved the trees, and I could hear the boards creak slightly as the temperature dropped. I prayed silently that this thing would go away. A few hours after dark, the whispering returned. It came from different angles, first one side of the cabin, then another. Then I heard soft taps on the planks covering the windows. I stayed quiet, gripping the knife handle until my knuckles hurt. Then I heard a long scraping sound along the wall behind me. It lasted several seconds, then stopped. Then it started on another wall. It was testing the cabin, moving around, feeling out the defenses. The sound of nails on wood made my hair stand up on my arm. I felt sweat trickle down my back. I wished I had something stronger than a knife. I wished I had something louder, something that would scare it off. I stood near the door and shouted, "Go away!" My voice came out shaky. I hit the door with my fist. I yelled a few times, until I was out of breath. The noises outside paused as if the thing was listening. Then I heard a faint whisper again, closer this time. It sounded almost like laughter, but very soft, like air escaping through teeth. I felt goosebumps on my neck. I backed away and held the knife in front of me. I pointed the flashlight at the walls as if I could shine through them. I noticed the boards vibrating slightly when it scratched. The wood wasn't thick. If it pushed hard enough, it might break through. I considered running out and trying to escape through the forest, but I didn't know the terrain. I could trip, fall, get lost. So I stayed inside, waiting. The scratching continued for hours. Sometimes it circled the cabin. Other times it focused on one spot. I could hear my own breathing fast and shallow. My throat was dry. My eyes burned from staring at the walls. I felt trapped, like a cornered animal. I paced around carefully not to make noise. I checked the door again, still locked. The planks on the windows held. The thing outside never tried to break in directly. It just scratched and tapped and whispered. Maybe it was enjoying my fear, or maybe it was just trying to wear me down. As the night went on, exhaustion weighed on me. My legs felt weak, and my arms shook from holding the knife too long. I forced myself to put it down for a moment and flexed my fingers. I kept the flashlight off to save the battery. In the dark, I listened. My ears adjusted, and I could hear even the slightest movement outside, twigs snapping occasionally, leaves rustling. Once I heard something that sounded like a low grunt, then footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving away from the cabin. I held my breath, hoping it was leaving. Near dawn, the noises stopped completely. I waited another hour before opening the door. The sky was gray, the clearing looked empty. I checked the walls. More scratch marks appeared, deeper this time. One board had a crack. I touched it. The wood felt rough. I was relieved it hadn't broken through. The windows were covered from inside, so I didn't see any new handprints. But I checked outside and found them again, arranged in another pattern on the glass. The mud was fresh. I gagged at the smell and turned away. I couldn't stay here another night. I packed my things. I took my flashlight, knife, remaining food, and water. I left the cabin as soon as it was bright enough to see the trail. I walked quickly, looking back every few minutes. I didn't see the figure again. The forest was quiet. The wind blew gently through the branches, and birds chirped in the distance. My heart was still pounding. I followed the path I remembered, keeping track of landmarks. A large rock near a bend. A fallen tree trunk. A patch of ferns. It took hours to reach my car. The engine started on the first try. I didn't relax until I was miles away on the main road. In the end, I couldn't find peace or inspiration up there. I found something else. I don't know what it was. I don't want to know. All I know is that I won't go back. I won't look for explanations. I won't tell anyone about that place. I just want to forget those whispers, those eyes, and those marks on the glass. I want to sleep without hearing nails on wood. I want silence that doesn't hide anything waiting just outside. I pushed open the old wooden door and stepped into the library. The hinges creaked, and the sound echoed down the main aisle. There were no other voices, no signs of movement. It was late, well past midnight. The front desk lamp was on, but no one was behind it. The security guard had told me I could stay until morning as long as I didn't make noise. I said I wouldn't. I only needed to look at one manuscript, and I had its reference number written down on a scrap of paper in my jacket pocket. I walked through the first aisle, trying to ignore the creaking of the floorboards. The place smelled like dust, old paper and varnish. The shelves were made of dark wood. The overhead lights were old and produced a weak yellowish glow. Some bulbs flickered now and then. There's no music, no hymn from air conditioning, just a distant sound of a clock ticking somewhere. I can't see. I find the call number on a label beside a shelf. My finger traces along the spines of old hardcover books. Most have no dust jackets. The leather on some spines is cracked, and a few titles are unreadable. I finally spot the manuscript wrapped in a dull cloth cover. It feels dry and slightly rough between my fingers. I take it off the shelf and carry it to a table with a small lamp. The table is uneven. When I put the manuscript down, it wobbles a bit. I pull out a chair. It's heavy and makes a scraping sound against the floor. I open the manuscript. The pages are yellow and stiff. I flip a few pages, squint at the handwriting. It's in a strange script. I can't read it. I try to study the shape of the letters. As I flip another page, I hear a muffled laugh, quiet and short. I look up, but I see nothing but shelves and books. I wait a few seconds, then lower my head and flip another page. Again, I hear a quiet laugh. It sounds like it's coming from inside the manuscript, not the room. I lean in and listen. I hear no breathing, no footsteps. Just the faint ticking of that clock and the buzz of the lights. I decide to turn around and check the aisles. I see rows of shelves stretching out. The rows look longer than before. When I walked in, I remember maybe 5 or 6 aisles. Now it seems like 8 or 10. I take a step away from the table and look at the patterns in the wood floor. Something feels off. When I glance back at the direction of the door, I see shelves where I thought there should be open space. I walk a few steps toward where I came in. As I do, I notice the corridor between shelves has shifted. Before I remember coming straight down an aisle to reach this table, now there's a slight turn, and the table isn't where it was relative to the door. I rub my eyes. Maybe I'm tired. I return to the manuscript and open it again. I move the lamp closer. The bulb hums softly. I flip a page. A small chuckle rises from the pages. I feel goosebumps on my arms. My throat tightens. I gently close the manuscript and stand up. I want to get out for a moment, maybe get some air. I look for the door. I remember it was just behind me, maybe 20 steps away. Now I see only shelves. I walk around the table, step to the left, and look down an aisle. It leads into darkness, farther than it should. I try another aisle. It leads to more shelves. I turn in a slow circle. There's no sign of the front desk or the entrance door. My heart beats faster. My forehead feels damp. I swallow and call out, "Hello?" My voice echoes back. No answer. I clear my throat and call again. "Is anyone here?" Nothing. I listen hard. I hear a faint scraping sound like something sharp against the wooden floor. It stops as soon as I focus on it. I take a few steps in that direction. The lights flicker overhead. I smell something like old varnish. I can't see any other source of light. No windows, no emergency exit signs. Just these old lamps and endless shelves. I try to remember how I got in. I walked straight ahead from the entrance, found the manuscript, and sat at a table. Now I can see the front desk or even the outline of doors. I walk down an aisle. The shelves are tall, maybe 8 feet or so, packed with old books. Each shelf looks similar. The wood is dark. The books have no bright colors. I reach the end of the aisle and turn right. I see another corridor. I hurry down it hoping to find a wall or a door. Instead, I end up back near the table with the manuscript. I realize I'm going in circles. I pick up the manuscript and carry it with me. Maybe if I return it, I can fix this somehow. I remember which shelf I took it from. I go there. Instead of the shelf with the label, I find another shelf with different books. I check another aisle, then another. I can't find the original spot. I hold the manuscript under my arm. The laughter from inside it is gone now, but I feel its weight. It seems heavier than before. The lights flicker again. I feel the floor vibrate as if a heavy shelf just moved. I look over my shoulder. The shelves have shifted position. One moves slightly, scraping the floor with a low groan. I try to remain calm. My breathing is fast. My mouth is dry. I whisper to myself to keep it together. I see no reason for panic, other than the impossibility of what I'm witnessing. But I can't argue with what I see. The shelves are moving on their own, rearranging the aisles. I try to reach a wall. I assume there must be a perimeter. I walk straight down a corridor, always forward, never turning. After what feels like a long time, I realize I'm still surrounded by shelves. I stop and rest my hand on a stack of books. The covers feel cold. I press forward again, and after several minutes I find a corner. There's a door with a small glass panel. I grab the handle. It's locked. I pull and push. Nothing. I knock on the door. The sound is dull. No echo. I hear the scraping sound again, closer now. I press my ear to the door. I hear nothing on the other side. I try the handle again. Still locked. I turn around. I see a long aisle leading away. The lights make a buzzing sound. I smell something like old wood polish. I walk slowly. My legs feel tired. I catch my reflection in a glass frame of a fire extinguisher cabinet. My face looks pale and sweaty. I look down at my jacket pocket and feel the paper with the reference number. I don't take it out. It doesn't matter now. As I move, I feel like the floor is slightly uneven. I hear a faint voice. It whispers my name. I freeze. I never told anyone here my name. No one asked. I didn't sign anything. How does anyone know it? I look around for a person. I see no one. Just shelves and old lamps. The voice is low and rough. It says my name again, then stops. I call out. Who is it? No answer. I walk toward where I think the voice came from. I reach another table. It's the same design as the first one, but in a different spot. The manuscript is gone from under my arm. I realize I'm holding nothing. I must have set it down without noticing. I spin around. On the table, I see the manuscript open on a page. I know I carried it with me. Now it's somehow on the table. I approach it and try to read the page. The ink looks faded. The handwriting tight and slanted. I can't understand it. I run my finger over the page. The paper feels warm. I lift my finger and rub it against my thumb. It leaves a slight residue of dust. I hear that laughter again, a muffled giggle. It lasts a second. I slam the manuscript shut and push it away. The scraping sound returns, louder this time. I look behind me. A shelf moves slowly across the aisle. I see its legs scraping the floor, leaving marks on the wood. The shelf blocks my path. I step forward. Another shelf moves in front of me. It's cutting off my escape. I feel trapped. I turn left and see a narrow gap. I squeeze through it before another shelf can close in. I find a small reading nook. There's a single chair, a low table, and a lamp. I check the lamp switch. It's stuck in the on position. I reach out and touch the bulb. It's hot. I jerk my hand back. I rub my hand on my pant leg. I try to calm down. I take slow breaths. The voice calls my name again from behind a shelf to my left. I stand up and walk towards the voice, holding my breath. I see a shape between the shelves. A thin shape, tall and hard to make out in the weak light. Before I can say anything, it steps back into darkness. I hurry to the spot, but there's no gap. No door, just more shelves. I speak aloud. I just want to leave. I'm sorry if I disturbed anything. I won't take the manuscript. My voice sounds shaky. The voice doesn't answer me. I hear nails scratching the floor again. The sound makes me tremble. It feels close. I search for something I can use as a tool. I find a heavy hardcover book and grip it tight in my right hand. My palm sweats. I inch forward, staying low, peeking around corners of shelves. Every time I try to move towards what should be an exit, the shelves shift. They scrape and groan. The lights flicker. I realize that my sense of direction is gone. I try to focus on small details. I notice a small brass plaque on one shelf. I remember passing it before. I try going the opposite way. After a few minutes of careful walking, I reach a corner that looks different. There's a glass door with a sign on it, but I can't read it clearly. I try the handle. It's loose. I pull it. The door opens into a small office room. I step inside. It's quiet, just a wooden desk, a green reading lamp, and a filing cabinet. I check the drawers of the desk. They're empty except for paper clips and an old pen. I pick up the phone on the desk. No dial tone, just silence. I check the window behind the desk. It's painted shut. I press my forehead against the glass. I see darkness outside, no moonlight, no street lights, just dark shapes of trees, maybe. The wood frame of the window is solid. I can't break it easily. I leave the office and find myself in a different corridor. The shelves here are arranged in a straight line. I can see an end in the distance. I walk toward it. My footsteps are loud. The corridor leads to a familiar area. I see the front desk lamp in the distance. I move faster. My shoes squeak on the floor. The front desk is right there. I can see the entrance door behind it. I rush forward, not looking back. I don't hear scraping shelves now. I don't hear laughter. I don't hear that voice. The entrance door is closed, but I see a faint line of light under it. I grip the handle and turn it. It doesn't open. I lean my shoulder into it and push. The frame rattles, but it stays locked. I step back. I look around. The silence is heavy. I suddenly hear that voice again, right behind me. I spin around. I see a blurred shape between the shelves about 10 feet away. The shape tilts its head as if watching me. I take a step forward and it moves back into the shadows. I shout, "What do you want?" The shape doesn't return. I rub my face with one hand and grip my teeth. I turn back to the door and try again. I twist the handle hard, yank it, try to lift it. Nothing. I pull a heavy dictionary from a shelf near the door and slam it against the handle. The metal rattles. The door shifts slightly. I try the handle again, and it gives a bit. I pull harder. It opens an inch, then two. I lean my foot against the door and pry it open until I can slip through. I push my shoulder against it and force it open far enough to pass. I step into the main hallway outside the library. The hallway lights are steady. The floor here is tiled, not wood. I smell nothing unusual, just the faint odor of old cleaning products. I look over my shoulder at the library door. It's closed now. I try the handle. It's locked from this side. I can see through the small glass panel. The inside looks normal. Shelves in the right places. The front desk. The reading area. Nothing moves, the lights are stable. I hear no laughter, no voice. I walk down the hallway toward the main entrance of the building. The large glass doors at the front are unlocked. I push one open and step outside. The air is cool and damp. The sky is still dark. In the distance, I hear a car on the street. I stand there for a minute, catching my breath. My muscles feel sore, and my shirt clings to my back. My name echoes in my mind. I don't understand what happened in there. I don't care right now. I take a few steps away from the building and look back. The old library stands quiet. Its windows are dark, the wooden doors shut. It looks ordinary from here. I don't see anything move. I hear nothing from inside. I turn away and keep walking one step after another until I reach the main gate and go out into the empty street. I do not look back again. I first noticed it late in the afternoon. I was standing at my living room window, looking down at the street below. My apartment is on the 5th floor of a building in the center of the city. I like to watch people pass by, check the traffic, and see if anything interesting is going on. That day, something felt off. I saw a dark figure on the sidewalk. It was standing completely still, facing my direction. I couldn't see a face, only a kind of black shape, like a tall, thin person wearing something dark. It didn't move at all. It just stood there, looking up at my balcony. I tried to ignore it and went about my evening routine. I cooked some noodles, ate them, watched some TV, and then checked again. It was still there, in the exact same spot, still looking up. Over the next few hours, I kept glancing down through my window. The streetlights were on, the traffic was steady, and people walked by without paying any attention to that figure. Nobody seemed to notice it. It did not make any noise. It did not lean. It did not shift its weight. It looked like a human shape, but it showed no signs of life. I began to feel uneasy. I closed my curtains, turned on all the lights inside, and tried to focus on something else. But every half hour or so, I checked again. still there. That night, I didn't sleep well. I had a strange feeling that something was off. In the morning, I opened my curtains. The figure was gone. The sidewalk looked normal. Cars, bikes, people walking with their bags, suits, and coffees. I felt some relief. Maybe it was just a weird guy who stood there for a while and then left. I got dressed, left for work, and tried to forget about it. When I came home that evening, around 7 p.m., I took a quick look out of curiosity. It was back, standing in the same spot, same posture, facing my balcony. The sunlight was fading. I waited for about 10 minutes, staring at it from behind my window. I tried to see if it was a person wearing a hoodie or something. The shape had no clear outline. It was like a silhouette. No face, no hands visible, just a still, dark form. I banged on my window to see if it reacted, but it did not. I checked my phone and wondered if I should call the police. But what would I say? There's a shape staring at me. It wasn't doing anything illegal, it was just standing on the sidewalk. Finally, I decided to wait. Hours passed, and it didn't move at all. I felt weird about going to sleep while I was still there. I turned off my TV, brushed my teeth, got into bed. I left my bedroom window curtain slightly open and turned my bedside lamp on. I lay there looking at my phone, trying not to think too much about this shape outside. Eventually, I dozed off. Around midnight, I woke up suddenly. It was quiet, and I had a strange pressure in my chest, like anxiety. I sat up and listened. Nothing. I looked towards the window. The figure was still outside. I could see it if I leaned forward a bit. Now it looked slightly different. It was bending a joint, maybe an arm or leg, but in a strange angle. It was subtle, just a slight shift in posture, but it didn't look natural. The limb bent backward, not forward. It was like watching a shadow puppet move in a way that no human body would. I stared, feeling sweat forming on my forehead. My breathing got shallow. I lay back down and tried to ignore it. After a long time, I fell asleep again. The next morning, the sidewalk was empty. I looked around when I left the building. Nothing seemed unusual. I decided to mention it to the doorman downstairs. He just shrugged, saying he hadn't noticed anything. I asked a neighbor in the hallway if he ever saw a weird figure outside at night. He looked at me funny and said no. I dropped it. I went to work. I tried to focus on normal tasks. All day I wondered if that thing would appear again. It did. Same spot, same time. I felt my stomach sink when I saw it. This time I watched it carefully without turning on my lights. I sat on a chair near the window with the lights off in my living room, looking down through a small gap in the curtains. After about an hour of watching, I saw it move again. It bent forward at the waist, but too far forward, like it would break its spine if it were human. Its arms or legs, I couldn't tell which, twisted at awkward angles that made no sense. There was no sound, no sign of pain or discomfort. Just quiet, controlled movements. Then it went still again. I felt the hairs on my neck rise. My heart was pounding. I went to get a glass of water. I tried to calm myself. This thing, whatever it was, just stood there. It didn't come inside. It didn't shout at me. It didn't threaten me openly, but it wouldn't leave me alone. Every night, same place, same stare. A few nights later, something changed. I had been leaving the lights on inside until very late, trying to pretend it wasn't happening. But electricity is expensive, and I was losing sleep. That night, I turned off most of my lights around midnight. I made sure all my doors were locked. My windows were closed. There was no way it could come inside. Still, I felt uneasy. I lay in bed and tried to ignore the pressure in my chest. I must have drifted off at some point. I woke up to a slight movement beside me. It was dark, but I had my phone next to me. Its dim light showed the outline of my bed. I felt the mattress dip slightly. It was as if someone sat down next to me. My heart rate skyrocketed. I froze. I could feel the sheet pulling slightly as if weighted down by something. I reached slowly for my phone and tapped the screen. The light brightened slightly. I couldn't see anything there, just my pillow and a bit of the mattress surface. But I could feel it. The weight was still there. I could feel a slight tension on the mattress springs. I didn't move for at least a full minute. I tried to control my breathing. My throat felt dry, and my mind was racing. Finally, I got the courage to reach out with my hand. I placed it flat on the mattress where I thought the weight was. I felt nothing solid. No arm, no leg, no cloth, but the mattress still dipped. Then I jerked my hand back when I felt it shift. It wasn't a human body, it felt like pressure from nowhere. I jumped out of bed and turned on the lights. The pressure disappeared immediately. I checked every corner of my bedroom. Nothing. I looked in my closet, under my bed, behind the curtains. Nothing. I was alone. My front door was locked, and my windows were all locked. A thing from the sidewalk or something like it had found a way inside. I stayed up the rest of the night with all lights on. I sat in my living room chair, facing my bedroom door, waiting. Nothing else happened that night. The next day I tried to act normal. I showered, had coffee, went to work, and tried to forget. But I couldn't. That night I came home and checked outside. The figure was there. I noticed something else. It had moved a few steps closer to my building. It was still on the sidewalk, but slightly to the left, closer to the building's main entrance. I watched it from my window. A few people passed by, but no one reacted. It was as if it were visible only to me, or maybe looked like a harmless shadow to others. Around 11 p.m., I turned off the lights in my living room and bedroom, leaving only my bathroom light on. I stood in my bedroom by the window and tried to watch the figure. It twisted an arm again, making a crunching sound that I barely heard through the glass. I flinched. I felt a knot in my stomach. Sweat gathered in my armpits. My head felt tense. I didn't know what to do. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? They would come, find nothing. Maybe think I was wasting their time. I had no solid evidence. I could try filming it with my phone, but the distance and lighting made it impossible to get a clear image. I tried anyway. I zoomed in, but it just looked like a blurry shape. No details, no proof. I turned off the bathroom light and went to bed. I lay under my blanket, fully dressed, with my phone's flashlight in my hand. I waited. After a long time, I felt it again. The mattress dipped at the far edge. It was so light as if someone was pressing down with a single fingertip, but heavy enough to pull the fabric tight. I shone the phone's flashlight there. I saw nothing. I pushed myself back against the headboard, staring at the spot. The dip got deeper. I could see the mattress material pulling down as if a knee pressed into it. I swung my hand at the space. I touched nothing but empty air. Still, the mattress moved. I felt my breathing become shaky. My heart was hammering. I got off the bed and ran to the living room. I turned on every light in the apartment. I checked the door again. It was locked. Checked the windows. They were also locked. I turned the TV on and tried to stay awake. Around 3 a.m., I went back to the bedroom. The bed looked normal now. I sat down slowly, feeling the tension in my shoulders and neck. I managed to sleep a few hours with all the lights on. Over the next few days, I tried new things. I slept on the couch and left the windows closed at all times. I tried to ignore the figure outside, but every night it was there. Some nights the mattress dipped again. Other nights I heard soft taps on the walls, on the ceiling, tiny sounds that made no sense. Once I heard a scraping sound under my bed. I checked and found nothing. One evening I decided to watch it for a longer period. I turned off my lights early, sat by the window and observed. It stood motionless for an hour. Then it moved an arm behind its back, bending it all the way around, forming a strange silhouette. I heard a soft crack through the glass. My body tensed up again, muscles tightening. I stepped away from the window. When I looked again, it was a few steps closer, but I didn't see it move those steps. It was just suddenly closer. I had the urge to open the window and shout, but I held back. I didn't want to draw attention. I didn't know what would happen if I tried to communicate. I tried leaving the apartment for a night. I booked a cheap hotel room a few blocks away. I carried a small bag with some clothes and my toothbrush. I felt relieved to be away from everything. I ordered a pizza, watched some late-night TV, and tried to sleep. But around 2 a.m. I heard a faint sound. I looked at the chair in the corner of the hotel room and saw the cushion dip slightly, as if someone invisible was sitting there. I froze. I realized it had followed me. I booked out first thing in the morning and went back to my place. At least at home, I knew the layout. I could try to handle it without telling anyone. I tried to set up a small trap. I'd placed a thin layer of flour on my bedroom floor before going to bed. I turned off the lights and waited. I felt the mattress dip again. In the morning, I checked the floor. No footprints, just smooth flour. I tried tape on the doorway, a piece of string at ankle height. Anything to prove something was moving in and out. Nothing ever moved. The figure was inside, but it left no trace. After a week of this, I was exhausted. My eyes were red from lack of sleep. I ate almost nothing. I felt my body trembling when the sun set. I knew it would be there outside. I knew it would come inside when I tried to sleep. I didn't know what it wanted. It didn't harm me. It never touched me. Never took anything. Never spoke. It just stared, bent its limbs in unnatural ways and pressed down on my bed or furniture at night. Sometimes I could swear I heard a faint breathing in the kitchen when I got up to drink water in the dark. I started turning on the lights in every room before walking through them. I was careful not to stand near windows at nights. I stopped looking down at the street, but sometimes caught a glimpse through the corner of my eye. It was always there, waiting, sometimes closer, sometimes farther, sometimes slightly to the left or right. When I looked directly, it stood still. When I looked away, it seemed to change position. I tried sleeping during the day and staying awake all night. It didn't help much. Even during the day, if I closed my eyes too long, I would feel the bed dip. If I stood by the kitchen sink, I would feel a presence behind me, only to turn and see nothing. I checked my door locks 100 times. I tried nailing the windows shut. Nothing changed. I lived like this for some time. I could feel my hands shaking whenever I heard a car passing by outside. I didn't know if I should leave the city or stay. I worried that if I left, it would just follow me again. I avoided telling anyone about it. I knew they wouldn't believe me, and I had no evidence. Now, after many nights of this, I'm sitting in my living room with the lights on. It's late. I know it's down there on the sidewalk. I can't see it directly from here, but it's there. If I turn off the lights, it will come inside again. If I lie down on my bed, it will sit next to me or press down on the mattress. If I close my eyes, I might feel something brush against my skin for a second. If I leave, it will follow me. I have no way to stop it. I have no solution. I just live with it now, trying not to let it break me completely. I do what I can to keep the lights on, keep my eyes open, keep breathing. It's all I can do. I jerk awake around 2 in the morning, my head pounding from stale indoor air caused by the distant hum of old wiring. I live alone in a neglected concrete building. The walls are cracked and the floors are uneven. The paint on the doors is faded and chipped. There are no decorations in the hallways. Instead, there's just old wiring, exposed pipes, and cheap light fixtures. It's a place I chose because it's quiet. I don't like dealing with people. I keep to myself, and nobody here cares. Most of the units are empty. A few neighbors never say much. That's fine. I live on the 3rd floor. My windows face a narrow alley cluttered with broken furniture and rusted trash cans. The smell from below creeps up whenever I open the window, so I keep it shut most of the time. That night I decide to go upstairs to the roof for a breath of fresh air. My apartment feels heavy and stale. The hot water pipes knock occasionally, and there's a low buzz coming from the fluorescent light in my kitchen. I'm wearing old sweatpants and a thin jacket. I slip on my shoes and step into the hallway. The door squeaks. The hallway is dark, except for one of the lights near the stairwell that flickers. The air smells like mold. I hear the distant sound of someone's television through a wall, muffled and distorted. My footsteps echo as I climb the concrete steps to the top floor and push open the heavy metal door that leads to the terrace. There's no one around. The city lights are far below, glowing faintly. I see a few distant rooftops. The sky is cloudy, blocking most of the stars. The roof has a low parapet. There are some old metal chairs thrown to one side and a few empty beer bottles scattered near them. I breathe in and out. The air is slightly damp and cooler than inside. I walk to the edge, lean forward, and look down at the alley. I see nothing unusual there. It's quiet for the moment. I turn around to head back, and that's when I see it. There is something crouched on the parapet. It's about human-sized, maybe a bit shorter, with grayish skin that looks dry and uneven. It's hunched forward, resting on its hands. Its hands don't look normal. The fingers are long and crooked, and the knuckles stick out at strange angles. It's looking right at me. Its eyes are narrow slits with no color inside. They're just dark openings. I feel my shoulders tense and my stomach tighten. My breath catches in my throat. The thing's chest moves slightly, like it's breathing slowly. It doesn't speak or make a sound. I back up a step as my back hits an old ventilation shaft behind me. I smell rust from the metal. I don't know what to do. The creature just stays there, silent. I look at the door thinking about going back inside, and and when I look at the parapet again, it's gone. I didn't see it move. It was there, then it wasn't. The parapet is empty. The old chairs and bottles are where they were. I walk over, slow, and lean over the edge, looking for any sign of it. There's nothing below but a dark alleyway and wet concrete. I look around the rooftop. No one is there. It's as if it vanished. My heart is pounding. I'm sweating. I feel stupid standing there. I know I saw it. I can still feel the lingering sense of something watching me. I don't want to stay on the roof, so I turn around and hurry back down the stairs. The hallway on the top floor feels colder than usual. The lights are dimmer. I move fast down the steps and reach my apartment door. I go inside and lock it. I check the windows to make sure they're shut. I turn on all the lights. The fixtures hum and buzz. I stand there breathing hard, listening for anything strange. At first, it's quiet. I go to my bathroom and splash some water on my face. The water runs rusty at first, then clears. My face in the mirror looks tired. My eyes are red. I feel a slight tremble in my hands. I can't shake the image of that gray thing. It looked human, but not human at the same time. I step into my living room. I try to read something or maybe watch TV, but I can't focus. My mind keeps jumping back to that moment. Then I start hearing something in the walls. It sounds like metal scraping. It's a faint noise, like a loose pipe shifting. I walk over to the corner of the room. The sound travels. It's above me now, in the ceiling. It moves slowly along the pipes and stops. I stand there listening. A minute goes by. Nothing. I try to tell myself it's just old building noises, but then the lights flicker. The fluorescent tube in my kitchen buzzes and dims, then comes back. The lamp in my living room does the same. I twist my neck to look around. The apartment seems smaller. I don't know why. Everything is in the same place. The old couch, the small coffee table, the TV on a cheap stand, the empty shelves. But I feel squeezed in, like the walls are pressing closer. I force myself to sit down on the couch and breathe normally. An hour passes. I keep the TV on, volume low. Some late night show plays, but I'm not paying attention. The flickering happens again. Then I hear a popping noise in the hallway outside my door. It's a quick snap, like someone bending a thin piece of metal. I stand up and go to the door. I press my ear against it. I hear something else, like a whisper or a faint breath, but I'm not sure. I unlock the door and open it a crack. The hallway is dim. The light at the far end flickers once more. I see nothing else. I close the door slowly. As I turn around, I feel a prickling sensation on my neck. I have that feeling that I'm not alone. The silence in the apartment feels heavier. I go to the kitchen and open a drawer. I take out a heavy screwdriver. I hold it in my hand. I'm not sure what I'm expecting to do with it. It just feels better to hold something solid. I walk to the window. The glass is dirty and I can see the alley below and a small bit of the next building's wall. I look at my own reflection. I look normal, just tired. Then I see a shape move behind me in the reflection. It's quick and low to the ground. I spin around, raising the screwdriver. There's nothing there, just my couch and my empty shelves. My heart is racing again. I step forward, checking behind the couch, under the small table, even inside the coat closet. Nothing. I feel my mouth go dry. I grab a bottle of water from the kitchen. The water tastes metallic. I spit it out in the sink. The pipe under the sink rattles. I look under the sink cabinet. The pipe is old and rusted. I see a small droplet of water forming on a joint, which falls and hits the bottom of the cabinet with a dull tap. I turn off all the lights except one lamp by the couch and try to sleep. I wrap myself in a blanket and sit curled in a corner of the couch, facing the door. But I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see that gray figure staring at me. I open my eyes and focus on the door. The minutes crawl by. I hear faint tapping in the walls again. I try to ignore it. I must have dozed off at some point because I wake up with a start. The lamp is flickering. I check my watch. It's almost 4 in the morning. The tapping in the walls is louder now. It's like something is moving through the pipes. I stand up and walk into the hallway. The door to my apartment is still locked. The hallway outside looks normal but dim. I step out with the screwdriver still in hand. The air is cold. The floor feels uneven. I walk slowly along the hallway, listening. There's a metallic scraping sound coming from the far end, near the stairwell. I move closer. step by step. The sound stops as I get near. I look down the stairs. The lower floors are dark. The building has always been poorly lit, but now it's worse. I smell damp concrete and dust. I grip the handrail. It feels rough and cold. Then I hear something overhead. I look up. There's a flickering light fixture above me, a few floors up. It buzzes, then goes still. I decide to go back to my apartment. I don't want to wander around. I turn around and walk back, but as I approach my door, I notice that the hallway seems longer. I don't remember it being this long. I see my door in the distance, but it feels farther away than before. I walk faster. My footsteps echo. I reach the door breathing hard and hurry inside. Back in the apartment, I feel dizzy. I sit on the couch and hold my head in my hands. I close my eyes and listen to my breathing. I can still feel that thing's presence. I open my eyes and turn on the TV again. Low volume, just for some noise. The TV flickers with static for a moment. Then a channel comes on. Some old rerun. The laughter of an audience sounds hollow. I try to calm down. I think about leaving the building, but I don't have anywhere to go at this hour and I hate going outside, especially now. I decide to at least check the front entrance. Maybe getting to the lobby will make me feel better. I take my keys and head out. As I walk down the stairs, I notice the pipes overhead. They're rattling gently. The sound is irregular, like something tapping on them from inside. I try not to imagine anything inside the pipes. I step into the lobby. It's small and has a flickering light above the front door. The glass door faces the empty street outside. I can see a few parked cars and a stray cat near a dumpster. It looks normal out there. I stand by the door, thinking about leaving. But I realize I'm wearing old sweatpants and a thin jacket. I don't have my wallet or phone. I only have my keys and the screwdriver in my pocket. I hesitate. I'm not sure if I'm ready to step out and wander the streets in the middle of the night looking like this. I turn around and see the hallway that leads back to the stairs. For a moment, it looks like the hallway is bending slightly, like it's not straight. I blink, and it's normal again. The building is messing with my eyes. I decide to return to my apartment and wait for morning. Maybe daylight will fix this. As I climb back up, the scraping in the pipes sounds louder. I smell something like burnt dust. I look at the walls. The paint is cracked, and I see a few small stains I didn't notice before. I keep climbing. When I reach my floor, the hallway lights flicker again. I walk to my door. It's shut. I unlock it and step inside. The apartment is quiet. I close the door and put the chain on. Inside, I check every corner again. The bathroom, the closet, under the bed, behind the couch. No one is here. I open the window just a crack to let in some air. A breeze comes through, carrying a hint of something rotten from the alley. I shut it again. I sit down on the floor and lean against the wall, facing the door. I keep the screwdriver in my hand. My muscles are tense. I can't relax. I listen to the pipes. They creak, then go silent. The lights hum quietly. Outside, I hear a distant siren, then nothing. I feel sweat on my forehead. I rub my eyes. They sting. Another hour passes. I check the time. It's closer to 5 now. The sky might start to lighten soon. I stand up and go to the window. I see only darkness and the faint glow of streetlights. No sign of dawn yet. I turn around, walk to the door, listening carefully. The hallway outside is quiet now. I open the door just a bit. The hallway looks normal. I step out. I feel a tightness in my chest. As I stand there, the light above flickers. I look at the end of the hallway and see a shape there. It's hard to make out, but it looks like a shadow. I squint, and it's gone. I feel my heart racing again. I close the door and lock it. I lean against the door, breathing through my nose slowly. My head hurts. I sit on the couch. I turn off the TV. I prefer the silence now. I listen to my own breathing. I grip the screwdriver tightly. My knuckles are white, and my shoulders ache from tension. I notice my mouth is dry, so I drink some water from the tap. It tastes stale but not metallic this time, and I swallow it slowly. The hours drag on until around 6, when the first hint of daylight creeps through the dirty window. The building noises settle down. The pipes only make their usual distant taps. The lights stay on without flickering. When I check the hallway again, it looks its normal length, and I see nothing unusual. I sit by the window and watch the alley get a bit lighter. The outlines of the trash cans and broken furniture become clear, and the sky is dull gray. I don't feel safe, but I feel less trapped. I don't know what happened last night, but I know I saw something on the roof, and the building felt strange afterward. However, in the early morning, it's quiet and still. I stand up and stretch, my legs are stiff. I still feel uneasy, like something could appear at any moment, but I force myself to believe that maybe it won't come back. Maybe I can get through the day. I make some instant coffee, and it tastes bad, but it's warm and gives me something to do. Then I walk around my apartment, checking each room again. Everything looks normal in the morning light. Finally, I go to the roof once more. Although I don't really want to, I have to know if it looks the same. The stairwell smells like old dust. The door to the terrace squeaks when I push it open. The roof is empty. The chairs and bottles are still there. The parapet looks the same. I look over the edge. The city is waking up. I hear a few distant cars, a door slamming somewhere far away. I see no sign of that gray figure. I stand there for a minute, my arms crossed, feeling the cool morning air on my face. I turn back and go downstairs. My hand on the railing is steady now. I reach my floor and walk down the hallway. The paint is chipped and the floor is uneven, but it's just a hallway. I unlock my door and step inside. The apartment smells like old coffee and stale air. I open the window fully and let the morning air in. It's not fresh, but it's not as heavy as last night. I don't know what that thing was, or why it appeared, or why the building felt strange after. I know that I'm tired and on edge. I sit down and try to rest. You'll get through this day. He'll stay here, keep quiet, and hope it never comes back. I try not to think about the eyes without pupils or the scraping in the pipes. I just listen to the city waking up outside and keep my eyes on the doorway, waiting just in case. I arrived at the village late in the afternoon. There was no one on the road when I got there. The houses were made of stone. Some of them had old wooden doors and heavy shutters. There were no cars and no streetlights. The air was cold, and I could see the outline of dark hills behind the houses. I was tired from walking. I had a small backpack with a few clothes, a flashlight, and some water. I needed a place to sleep. I found a house that looked empty. Its walls were rough stone, and it had a small wooden door. The windows were set deep into the walls, and the glass was uneven. I tried the door, and it opened. Inside, it smelled like damp stone and old dust. There was a single room downstairs with a table, a chair, and a small fireplace. A narrow staircase led to a room upstairs. I climbed the stairs. The upper room had a bed with a thin mattress, a small wooden chest, and a window that faced out toward the hills. The door to the room had a simple latch. The floorboards were uneven and creaked when I walked. I checked the bed. It was dry enough. I unpacked my things and placed them on the chest. I planned to rest here for one night and then move on in the morning. As the sun went down, I noticed the wind picking up. It rushed through the small gaps in the window frame. The room got colder. I sat on the bed and looked outside. The moon was bright enough to show the outlines of the terrain outside. I saw a few dark shapes near a row of old houses. They looked like people standing around. They did not move. I stared at them for a while, but I could not see their faces or tell if they were wearing anything distinctive. After some time, I turned away and looked at the wall. When I looked again, they were gone. Night fell completely. The room was dark. I turned on my flashlight and checked the latch on the door. It seemed solid enough. The wind was stronger now. It rattled the window. The glass shook, and the wooden frame groaned as if it might crack. I placed the chair under the door handle to feel safer. I had a strange sense that something was off. I hadn't heard any voices or footsteps, just the wind outside. Then I heard a low sound outside the window. It wasn't a voice, but more like a faint humming. I turned off my flashlight and looked through the window. I saw shapes moving outside. They were silhouettes against the moonlight. There were several of them, and they seemed to be swaying. Their arms and legs moved in a slow, steady rhythm. I tried to see their faces. When I leaned close to the glass, I could see their eyes. The eyes looked white. They had no visible pupils, just white surfaces looking straight at me. I pulled back from the window. My heart was pounding. I gripped the windowsill. I took a deep breath. I couldn't hear words, but I felt like they were chanting something. The sound was too soft and too strange to be anything else, but there were no clear syllables, just a vibration in the air. The wind pushed against the window again. The glass shook. I worried it might break. I looked down at the floor. The boards were old. I thought I felt something under them. It was like a scraping or a scratching. I crouched down and put my ear to the floor. The sound was faint, but it was there. Something was sliding under the floorboards. I imagined an animal, maybe a rat, but it didn't sound like small claws. It sounded heavier and more deliberate. I got back up and looked at the door. The chair was still in place, and the latch was still there. I did not want to open the door. I did not know what might be outside. I turned my flashlight on and checked the corners of the room. The walls were bare stone, and the chest at the foot of the bed was solid. I tried to open it, but inside I found only a folded blanket and a small metal box that was empty. I took the blanket and put it on the bed. I tried to calm myself and listened carefully. Outside, I heard the wind and that strange humming, which rose and fell but never formed words. Inside, the furniture creaked, and the bed shook slightly as if the floor were shifting underneath it. I put my hand on the bed frame and felt the vibration. It was coming from below through the floorboards. I lifted the corner of the rug on the floor and found a loose board. I pressed on it, but it didn't give easily. I didn't want to pull too hard and make noise. The shapes outside were still there. I could see them when I got close to the window. They moved slowly, always facing my direction. Their eyes never closed. I could see their heads tilt as they rocked back and forth. I tapped the window glass with my finger, but they didn't react. They just kept moving and humming without sound. Their mouths might have been moving, but it was hard to tell. I only saw silhouettes in those pale eyes. I felt sudden pressure in my ears. It was like air got heavier. Sound under floor became clearer. I heard scraping, low grinding sound. I backed away from room center, stood against wall, held flashlight tight, aimed it at floor. Saw floorboards trembling, dust rose between boards. Heart beat hard in chest. Wanted to leave room, but wasn't sure if figures outside were also at door. Walked quietly to door, put ear against it. Didn't hear anything on other side. Considered opening, but thought of stepping into dark hallway downstairs. Made me hesitate. Stayed in room. Wind got louder. Chanting outside didn't stop. Silhouettes kept moving. Pulled bed closer to window to block some view. Bed legs screeched against floor. Stopped and listened again. Sound under floor got more intense. It was like something pushing upward against boards. Felt sweat on forehead, throat dry. No water left. Took deep breath. Tried to think. Had flashlight backpack with clothes. Nothing else that could help. Wind pushed window again. Glass bent inward. Heard small crack. Tried to wedge blanket between frame and glass. Didn't help much. Looked outside again. Figures were closer now. They stood just a few feet from the wall of the house. I could see their shoulders rise and fall as if they were breathing in unison. Their heads tilted at the same angle. Their eyes glowed pale in the moonlight. I could see no details of their faces or bodies, just outlines in those eyes. Inside, the furniture creaked. The chest lid rattled. The chair at the door shook. The bed frame vibrated. I dropped to my knees and pressed my hands against the floor. I felt a steady thump from below. It was slow and rhythmic. My stomach twisted and I felt my legs tense. I thought about opening the trapdoor, if there was one, but I had no proof it existed. I only saw a loose board. I tried pulling it up and it lifted a bit but got stuck. I heard a scraping sound from below, and I froze. I stood up and pointed my flashlight at the board. I saw small cracks appearing. Dust trickled out. I backed away and stood near the wall. I watched as the board flexed upward by a fraction of an inch. I gritted my teeth and tried to remain quiet. The chanting outside grew louder, or maybe I was just more aware of it. It was still not a real sound, more like pressure in my ears. The wind rattled the window. The silhouette swayed outside. I decided to try the door. I removed the chair and unlatched it slowly. I opened it a crack. The hallway was dark. The staircase led down into total darkness. I listened. I heard nothing inside the house, but the creaking of wood and the sound from under the floor. I stepped out into the hallway, holding my flashlight low. The stairs felt uneven under my feet. Downstairs, the main room was cold and empty. I passed my light over the table and chair. They looked the same as before. The fireplace was dark. I checked the door to the outside. It was closed. I tried the handle. It did not move. I pulled harder. It was stuck. I tried pushing it. Nothing. I aimed my flashlight at the edges of the door and saw that they were sealed by something like dried mud. I tried scraping it with my fingernail. It was hard and dry. I didn't have a tool to chip it away. I heard a noise upstairs. It sounded like wood cracking. I rushed back up and entered the room. The loose board in the floor had lifted more. I saw a gap. Something was pushing from below, maybe a piece of wood or something else. I shone my flashlight into the gap. I saw darkness and something pale. It retreated as soon as the light hit it. I backed away and held the flashlight steady. My hands were shaking. My mouth was dry. I heard a shuffling sound under the floor, moving toward the wall. I followed it with my ears. It circled beneath the room, scraping and tapping. I pulled the chest over the loose board, trying to block it. The chest was heavy. It made a loud noise. I stopped and listened. The sound under the floor paused. Then it started again, scraping along the edges of the room. The chanting outside got stronger. I could almost feel it vibrating in my head. I gripped my flashlight and stared at the window. The silhouettes were pressed against the wall now. Their eyes looked directly into the room. I couldn't see any mouth movement, but I sensed their humming more clearly. I tried not to look at their eyes. They seemed to glow. The wind grew louder, and I thought the window would break at any moment. Suddenly, I felt a yank from below. The chest moved slightly. I pressed my foot against it, but it shifted again. Whatever was under the floor was pushing upward. The floorboards creaked with a cracking noise. I looked around for something else heavy. The bed was lighter than the chest, and the chair was too small. I considered leaving the room again, but I had nowhere to go. The downstairs door was sealed, and I didn't know if the other rooms offered any escape. If there were windows downstairs, they might also be stuck. I remembered the stone walls outside. The entire place felt sealed off. I leaned on the chest with all my weight. I felt vibrations through my arms and legs. My heart pounded, my breath came in short bursts. The silhouettes outside began to tap on the window. The glass rattled under their tapping. It sounded like fingernails on glass. I saw small cracks form. I shone my flashlight at them, and they pulled back slightly, but they didn't leave. They tapped again, slow and steady. The floorboard under the chest cracked, and I jumped back, nearly slipping on the rug. The chest shifted and tilted. A long, thin object pushed through the gap. It looked gray and rough, like a long piece of old wood. It twisted and scraped against the side of the chest. I kicked at it, and my foot hit it, causing it to jerk back and disappear below the floor. I heard a scraping sound as it moved away under the boards. I took a moment to catch my breath. My chest felt tight. I wiped sweat from my forehead. The silhouettes outside hit the window again. This time I heard a small piece of glass fall inward. I saw a tiny hole where the glass had cracked. Cold air rushed in, and I saw one of those pale eyes peering through the hole. I stepped back, holding the flashlight, and tried shining it into that eye. The shape outside flinched and moved away from the hole. I realized the light bothered them. I kept the flashlight aimed at the window. Under the floor, the scraping moved toward the corner. I heard a thumping sound, then silence. I stood there aiming the flashlight at the window, waiting. The chanting outside never stopped. The silhouettes kept swaying, but they stayed a bit away from the hole in the glass. They tapped the frame of the window instead, testing it. I kept the light on them, forcing them to keep their distance. I wondered how long the batteries in my flashlight would last. I tried not to think about that. The wind grew stronger. The roof beams creaked. Dust fell from the ceiling. I had to stay focused. I couldn't sleep. I paced around the room. I checked the gap in the floor again. It remained partially open, but the chest covered most of it. I aimed the flashlight there too. Nothing came out. My legs were tired, but I didn't want to sit down. I kept hearing the tapping on the window, the scraping under the floor, and the strange humming sound. I could feel my heart racing. My breathing was quick and shallow. After a long time, I noticed the sky outside getting slightly brighter. The wind remained strong, but I could see a hint of pale light in the distance. The silhouettes outside moved back, away from the window. They seemed to be fading into the shadows near the other houses. Then they stopped. I watched them step away, leaving the immediate area outside the window empty. The tapping stopped. Under the floor, I heard one last scrape, and then silence. I waited, holding the flashlight on the gap, but nothing emerged. I listened to the wind. It was still strong, but without the chanting, it sounded normal. I approached the window and looked outside. I saw empty space and the outlines of stone houses. The silhouettes were gone. The only sound was the wind whistling through cracks in the walls. I decided to try the door downstairs again. I left the room, went down, and examined the seal around the door. With enough force and a piece of broken chair leg, I managed to chip away at the dried mud. After several minutes of work, the latch moved. I pulled the door open. Cold morning air rushed in. The street was empty and quiet. I looked around and saw no figures, no eyes, no movement. I stepped outside, leaving the house behind. I felt relief that the open air was around me again. I walked away, not looking back at that window or the gap in the floor. I kept walking until I reached the edge of the village. I didn't see anyone or anything strange. It was just an old place of stone and silence. I kept moving, determined not to spend another night there. I pushed the door open and stepped inside the main work area. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me. The place is quiet. It smells like dust and old stone. I've worked here for weeks, focusing on small cracks and stains on these sculptures. The workshop is large. There are old statues everywhere, each one on a heavy base, each one placed on different parts of the concrete floor. Some are tall, some are small, and all look worn. The walls are high and the shelves hold tools, brushes, sponges, solutions, and rags. Tonight I am alone. I have a key to come and go because the owner trusts me. I never saw anything strange before, but something feels off right now. I walked between the statues, checking the restoration tasks I planned for tonight. I looked at a female figure carved in marble. Her face is smooth and her eyes are blank. I set down my bag, opened it, and took out a small flashlight, a fine brush, and some cleaning solution. I wanted to fix a crack along her neckline. I positioned my work light closer and squinted at the surface. The stone is cool under my fingers. My hands are steady. Outside, I hear nothing but the hum of the lights. I feel a slight draft from somewhere. I notice that her arm is angled in a certain way. I remember it a bit differently. I think her arm was closer to her torso before. Maybe I remember wrong. I check old notes on my phone. I have some reference photos. I flipped through them. In the photo, her arm is about 2 inches away from her body. Now it seems maybe half an inch. I frown. Maybe I'm just tired. I walk away and look at another sculpture. This one is of a man with a long beard and a serious expression. I know this piece well because I spent 2 nights cleaning it. I remember the way his hands rest on a small plinth. Now his fingers look curled in a slightly different angle. I lean in and stare. The stone is solid. It does not bend. I look away, then look back quickly. Nothing changes. The difference is subtle, but I feel certain something is off. I move deeper into the workshop. The back area is darker. The overhead lights are weaker there. I approach a statue in a corner. This one is strange. I do not know its origin. It seems older than the rest. The figure is unclear. It is like a human shape without a face. The body is rough, and the stone is darker. I run my hand along the surface. It is cold as I expect, but after a few seconds I feel a slight vibration. I pause and hold my breath. The stone feels like it has a heartbeat. I lift my hand and press it again. Harder. There is a steady pulse. Very faint. My heart rate speeds up. I pull my hand back. I look around the room. Nothing moves. I step back, shining my flashlight across the statues. Each one stands still, silent, heavy. I tell myself I'm imagining things. I force a long exhale. My mouth feels dry. I return to the main area, walk around a few other pieces, and check their positions. I think about calling someone, but it's late. I don't want to seem crazy. I try to focus on the job. I grab my brush and approach the first statue again. I raise the brush and start cleaning the tiny crack near her neck. The brush makes a soft scraping noise. The air smells like the cleaning solution. My shoulders feel tense. I keep checking the statue's arm position from the corner of my eye. I don't see movement. I work for about 10 minutes, then notice a faint sound. It's not the lights. It's something else. Soft whisper. I stop brushing and listen. It's quiet. I hear my own breathing, faster than normal. Then I hear a soft voice saying my name. It's like a whisper right behind my shoulder. I turn around fast. There is no one, just rows of statues. Some draped with cloth covers, some uncovered. My palms sweat. I wipe them on my pants. I say nothing. I listen again. There's no whisper now. I pick up my flashlight and walk slowly toward the center of the room. I point the beam at each sculpture. Their stone faces stare ahead, blank and stiff. I stand there, my heart pounding, waiting for something. Nothing moves. I decide to test something. I step back a few feet from a sculpture I know well. It's a male torso without a head, just shoulders and chest. I remember its exact position because I measured it when I restored a crack near the collarbone 2 nights ago. I look away for a moment, then look back. The torso seems angled a bit more to the side. Maybe it's the angle of my flashlight. I step closer and crouch down. I look at the dust on the floor. There are no footprints, no drag marks. The statue's pedestal is heavy. I cannot move it easily by hand. I reach out and touch it. The stone surface is cold and still. I wait, shining the light along its edge, but I do not see movement. I stand up and try to calm down. I think about leaving. Maybe I'm too tired to work. My head feels light. I decide to finish one small job and then go home. I move to a statue of a pair of hands clasped together. I start brushing off some dust. My brush strokes slow and steady. I focus on the sound, soft scraping, bristles against stone, nothing else. Then I hear that whisper again, very quiet. My name repeated twice. I spin around, shining the flashlight. The statues stand in silence. Their shapes seem different now. I cannot be sure. I feel my throat tighten. I keep swallowing to clear it. My stomach feels tense. I walk around the perimeter of the room, checking the locked door at the far end. It is closed. The door is heavy and only opens with a code. I try it. The code works. I open the door slightly, look into the hallway. The hallway is empty. The security camera in the hall shows a green light. Everything looks normal. I close the door and return inside. I think maybe I should call the owner, but I hesitate. I don't want to sound scared. I am a professional restorer, and I should handle this. Maybe it's just my mind playing tricks because I'm alone. I try to ignore the feeling and approach the strange faceless statue in the corner again. I want to confirm what I felt. I put my hand on it carefully, pressing my palm flat against the surface. It feels cold at first. I hold my breath and wait. My heart is beating fast. After a few seconds, I feel that same subtle rhythm under the stone. I pull my hand away, and I step back. I feel sweat on my forehead. I rub my sleeve across my face. My legs feel weak. I say my name out loud, trying to ground myself. My voice sounds shaky in the quiet room. I move to a nearby workbench and pick up a small chisel. I grip it tight. I feel silly, but I want something in my hand. The whisper comes again, so soft. I almost doubt it. It sounds like it's coming from all around me, not from a single direction. My name is spoken slowly, drawn out. I shout, "Who is there?" My voice echoes. Nothing answers. I feel the hair on my arms stand up. I look at the closest statue, a half-finished piece that shows a figure bending forward. I move around it, shining the light on its face. The face is chipped. The mouth is slightly open. I study the mouth shape. I look away, then back. Now the mouth looks more open than before. I stare, leaning in close. The stone is chipped, but I see a small gap that wasn't there. I lean even closer, holding my breath. I smell dust and something damp. I reach out with the chisel's tip, tapping the edge of the mouth. The stone flakes a bit. Then I feel a slight movement under my fingertips, like a tiny shift. I jump back and almost lose my footing. I back away, shining the flashlight around. Every statue seems different now. Their arms, torsos, and faces are not exactly the same as before. I cannot catch them moving, but whenever I look away, something changes. I try blinking fast, hoping to catch a shift. I see nothing move, but each time I look again, something is off. A head turned a fraction to the left, a hand raised a bit higher. My breathing is shallow. I can feel my heart pounding in my chest and neck. I take out my phone and try to record a video. I hold the phone in front of me, walking slowly around the room, filming the statues. I speak quietly to record a note. I'm in the workshop. Something is happening. The statues, they are moving when I'm not looking. My voice sounds unsteady. I stop recording and play the video back. On the screen they look the same, unmoving. I stare at the video. It shows nothing strange. I feel frustrated and scared. I don't know what to do. I decide to try something else. I set my flashlight on a shelf, pointing it at a sculpture. I step back and turn my body away, but keep my ears open. I hear a soft scraping noise, very light, like stone against stone. My heart jumps. I turn around fast. The statue's arm is in a new position. I'm sure of it now. I didn't imagine this. I pick up the flashlight and approach the statue. The stone is solid. The arm angle has changed. I feel my face getting hot. I mutter curses under my breath, walking around in circles, shining the light everywhere. The whisper returns, calling my name. I try to locate it. It sounds close, then far, moving around me. The room feels cramped. I feel sweat trickle down my back. I move toward the exit again. I don't want to stay here any longer. I gather my tools and shove them into my bag. My hands shake. I head for the door with the code panel. I enter the code quickly, glancing over my shoulder. The statue stands still, but I feel them watching me. The latch clicks. I pull the door open. Before I leave, I shine the flashlight one last time across the workshop. I see one of the statues at the far end. A tall one with a missing arm now leaning slightly forward. It was upright before. My stomach tightens. I step into the hallway, pulling the door closed behind me. I lock it. My hand hovers on the lock. I hear a muffled scraping sound from inside. My throat is dry. I swallow hard. In the hallway, the fluorescent lights are steady. I breathe a bit easier, but my heart is still racing. I walk toward the exit of the building. My footsteps echo on the tile floor. I reach another door that leads outside. The air in the hall smells cleaner and less stale. I rub my face with my free hand. My shirt sticks to my back. I feel a slight tremble in my legs. I think about what I saw, but I do not understand it. I do not know if the statues will stay like that, or if they will return to their original positions by morning. I just know that I cannot go back in there right now. I pass by a small storeroom and pause. I could check more rooms to see if anything else is strange, but I decide against it. I do not want to see anything else. I head straight to the main exit. When I push the door open and step outside, the cool night air hits my face. I breathe it in, trying to steady myself. The streets are quiet. I hear a distant car passing somewhere. The building behind me is silent. I stand there, bag over my shoulder, my mind racing. I think about calling the owner now, but I hesitate. He will ask if I am okay, and I do not know what to say. I might say that there are strange noises or that the statues seem unstable, but I do not want to sound irrational. I decide to go home and return tomorrow with someone else. I can ask a coworker to come and check, pretending I need help moving a piece. Then I'll watch the reaction and see if they notice anything. Here's the corrected text. Right now, I just want to leave this place behind for a while. I walk down the quiet sidewalk, feeling tension in my neck and shoulders. I try to keep my breathing steady. My face feels hot, and I keep wiping my palms on my pants. I remember the feeling of that strange statue's surface, its steady pulse. I remember the whisper saying my name, the arm that moved when I turned around, the shifting expressions. I look back at the building once. The windows are dark, and the big steel door is closed. I cannot see inside. I imagine the statues standing there in silence, unmoving. Their blank eyes point at empty space. I turn away and keep walking. I reach my car, unlock it, climb in, close the door, and lock it. I lean back in the seat, breathing hard through my nose. My hands grip the steering wheel. I can feel my heart still beating fast. I start the engine, drive away, checking the rearview mirror several times, half expecting to see something behind me. The streets are empty and quiet. The workshop is out of sight now. I shake my head, try to think of something else. Anything else, but I keep feeling that pulse under the stone, that subtle vibration, and I keep hearing that whisper. It will be hard to sleep tonight. I arrived 3 days ago. My name is Eric. I came here to look into the old stories about this lake. The local librarian mentioned a few accounts of strange sightings on the shore over the years. I rented a small one-room house next to the lake. The house stands a short distance from the water, separated by a thin line of mud and uneven stones. I carried in a wooden table, a folding chair, a box of notebooks, and a heavy flashlight. I set up my bed in the corner near the only window. At night I can see the lake's surface. The moonlight makes it look almost flat, but the water is darker than I expected. The people in town said not to stay here after midnight, but I ignored that. I wanted to see things for myself. I wanted facts, not stories. On the first night, I sat near the window and watched the surface. There was no wind. The water did not move, but it did not reflect things the way normal water should. The shape of the moon looked uneven in it, like a piece of dirty glass. I tried shining my flashlight, but the beam only lit up a small patch. Nothing happened. Around midnight, I felt a chill and turned on a small heater I brought. I went to sleep on my cot and woke up at sunrise. Nothing unusual. I took a few notes, then boiled coffee on the portable stove and ate a can of beans. I spent the day walking around the shore and examining the ground. The soil felt damp, even though we had no recent rain. There were no animal tracks, just a few small holes in the mud that I could not identify. I planned to take the rowboat I had borrowed from my neighbor and try to see the lake from the center. I wanted to check if something would appear on the surface if I looked straight down. At the time, it felt like a simple field exercise, a routine check. On the second night, I positioned myself at the window again. I had my notebook on my lap and my flashlight ready. I kept the heater on low. I listened. There were no voices, just a dull silence that felt heavier than normal silence. I waited until midnight. When the clock on my phone showed 12 o'clock, I noticed a change on the surface of the lake. The moon was still visible up in the sky, bright enough to reflect. On the water, however, the reflection now had spots and shapes that did not line up with anything I could see in the sky. I leaned closer to the window. I saw something like a face, maybe two faces, spread across the ripples. They did not move in a natural way. They twitched, changed size. I rubbed my eyes. The shapes did not vanish. I could see them clearly, as if someone had placed images under the surface. I went outside with my flashlight, careful not to slip on the wet ground. I stood at the edge and pointed the flashlight at the water. The light hit the surface. The faces wavered but did not disappear. I pushed the rowboat into the water. It made a low scraping sound when it slid off the mud. I stepped in and started rowing slowly. There was no wind. The boat moved without much trouble. I kept the flashlight aimed at the lake. About 10 feet from shore, I saw the faces again. They drifted under the water, pale and distorted. I tried to see if it was a reflection of my own face, but it was not. The faces had expressions I couldn't recognize in myself. Their eyes looked wide and tense. Their mouths opened and closed slowly. I leaned over the side, holding the flashlight close. The water was too dark to see anything below the surface. Then I felt something tap the underside of the boat. It didn't sound like a fish. It felt heavier, a dull thud. I froze. I looked around. The surface was calm, but something was touching the boat from below. I felt another thud, then a sliding movement along the hull. I gripped the oars and moved back toward the shore. My hands shook a bit and my breathing was short. I tried to keep my movement steady. I didn't want to lean too far over or make too much noise. When the hull scraped the mud near the shore, I jumped out and pulled the boat up. I felt relieved as soon as I was on solid ground. I stood there for a moment, breathing through my nose, trying to slow my heartbeat. I pointed the flashlight at the water again. The faces were gone. The surface looked still. I heard a faint drip of water. I looked down at my boots. They were sinking slightly into the mud. The smell was stale. I dragged the boat a bit further up, making sure it wouldn't drift away. Then I walked back to the house, shining the flashlight on the ground to avoid stepping into a hole. When I opened the door, I noticed something strange. The floor was damp. I had left the door locked and the window shut. I looked for leaks but found none. Then I saw something on the floor, footprints. They were bare footprints, about the size of my own feet, maybe a bit wider. They started near the door and went across the room, stopping near my bed. I didn't see anyone inside. I checked under the bed, behind the small table, and inside the closet. Nothing. The house was empty, except for me. My heart was still pounding. The damp footprints looked fresh. Small droplets of water had trickled from them. I touched the floor. The moisture clung to my fingertips. I felt uneasy. I had no weapons, no tools besides my flashlight and a small pocket knife. I stood still for a while, listening. There was a faint humming sound. It sounded like someone humming a tune, very low, out of tune, and slow. I followed the sound. It led me to the corner opposite my bed. There was nothing there, just the bare wall, but the humming seemed to come from inside the room. I turned the flashlight off, then on again to check if there was something unusual that only showed up in certain light. I saw nothing except the empty wall. The humming continued. It sounded like a lullaby, but the melody didn't seem to have a pattern. Sometimes it rose in pitch, sometimes it fell. I stepped closer to the wall. The humming became louder. It sounded like someone whispering behind a layer of wood. I pressed my ear against the wall. I heard a slight scraping sound. I moved away quickly. I checked the door. It was still locked. I checked the windows. They were closed. I touched the footprints again. The water was cold. I decided to open the front door and look outside. Maybe I would see fresh prints leading away. I stepped out and shone the flashlight on the ground. The mud near the entrance had no footprints. There were no tracks around the house. I looked toward the lake. Nothing. I listened. The humming was quieter outside, so it had to be coming from inside. I went back in, trying not to breathe too loudly. My chest felt tight. I tried to think logically. Maybe there was a trick in the construction of the house. Maybe water had seeped in from under the walls. Maybe my own boots tracked in the moisture. But my boots were on the mat where I left them, and they weren't soaked. The footprints had a distinct shape. Bare feet, no shoes. I knelt down and measured them with my hand. They were slightly wider than mine. The toes were blunt, not shaped like mine. The step length was shorter than mine. The humming shifted to a low whisper. I could make out only faint breaths, not words. I pressed my back against the front door, trying to keep everything in sight. Then I saw a small droplet of water fall from the ceiling onto my table. I aimed the flashlight upward. The ceiling was plain wood. No leaks, no stains. I watched another droplet form out of nowhere and fall to the floor. I wiped it with my sleeve. It smelled like the lake water, stale and muddy. I felt my stomach tighten. I wanted to leave, but I had nowhere else to go tonight. The nearest inn was miles away and I had no car. I took a deep breath. I decided to stay awake and watch. I sat on my cot, holding the flashlight. I turned off the heater to listen better. The air felt cold, and my body started to shiver. The whispering stopped after a while. The house became silent again, but I couldn't sleep. I kept looking around, shining the light on the walls and floor. The footprints gradually faded as they dried, but I still saw the outlines. My heart kept pounding. I waited until dawn, only dozing off in brief moments. Whenever I closed my eyes, I heard a faint, watery sound. The next morning, I boiled coffee and ate a cold meal. My appetite was low. I tried to write down what I experienced. I described the faces in the water and the footprints. I wrote about the humming sound. I recorded the exact time, midnight. I decided to try again that night, but this time I would place a small mirror by the window and set up my phone to record video. If the faces appeared again, I wanted proof. I spent the day exploring the shore. I went around the lake with my boots and a rain jacket. I followed the muddy bank. I saw no birds, no fish jumping near the surface. The water looked thick. I poked it with a stick. The stick came out with a thin layer of slime. I wiped it off on the grass. I found some rocks with odd shapes, but nothing else. Toward evening, I met the neighbor who had lent me the boat. He asked if I'd seen anything strange. I said I had trouble sleeping. He nodded, saying something about how people never stay long in that house. I tried to ask him more, but he only shrugged and said he had chores to do. I returned to the house before sundown and set up my phone on a small tripod inside, near the window. I placed the mirror on the sill, angled so it would show me what was outside even when I wasn't looking directly. I tested the camera, making sure the lens could see the reflection of the lake. I prepared my flashlight and my knife and placed them on the table. This time I locked the door and checked it twice. I also put a chair against it. I placed my boots near the bed. I ate a small can of beans and drank water. I felt tense. My shoulders were stiff. My hands felt cold, so I kept rubbing them together. At midnight, I watched the lake through the window. The moon was bright, and the surface of the water looked calm. I saw the reflection of the moon as a distorted shape again. Then something changed. The reflection stretched out, forming several shapes. I focused the camera on it, making sure it recorded. I saw the faces again, but this time there were more of them. They seemed to drift from one side of the reflection to the other. I saw their eyes looked forward as if searching for something. I felt a tingling in my arms. I heard a faint tapping sound against the window. I looked around inside the house, but nothing was there. I went outside, staying close to the door. I shone the flashlight on the lake. The faces were visible to my naked eye, not just in the mirror or camera. I could see them shift under the surface. Then I heard a faint scratching sound from under the boat, which was still on the shore. I knelt down and looked underneath. I saw a damp patch of mud, but nothing else. I stood up, careful to keep the flashlight steady. Something touched my ankle. I jumped and pointed the light down, but there was only a small puddle of water. My pant leg was damp. I felt a slight pressure, like a small current of water moving around my foot, but I could not see it. I hurried back inside and closed the door. I checked the camera. It was still recording. I felt like I was breathing too fast. I tried to calm down, but my heart was racing. I heard the humming again, this time at the window. It sounded like the same tune as before. I stepped back against the wall, keeping the flashlight aimed at the glass. The glass showed my reflection and the reflection of the room behind me. I didn't see anyone else. I turned off the flashlight for a moment, trying to see if something glowed outside. The darkness made my eyes strain, but I saw nothing unusual. I turned the light back on. The humming stopped. I checked the floor for footprints. I found a new set of wet footprints near the wall, where I heard the humming the first night. The footprints led in a small circle, then disappeared. I felt exhausted but too wired to sleep. My head ached. I waited until morning again. When the sun rose, I checked my phone. The camera had recorded the faces in the reflection. I could see them on playback, faint but visible. I replayed the audio and heard the humming. My voice shook a little when I spoke into the recording. Now I had something. I had some evidence, but I didn't know what to do next. The footprints dried again, leaving no trace. The humming never sounded during the day. The lake looked ordinary in sunlight. I thought about leaving, but I wanted more proof. Maybe I could get samples of water, maybe record from a boat. But the idea of going out on the lake again made my chest feel heavy. I remembered the tapping under the boat. I remembered the damp footprints in my house. The smell of stale water lingered inside even after I opened the window. I decided to stay one more night. I tried to rest during the day, lying on a cot with my eyes closed. I couldn't sleep well. I kept hearing faint watery sounds every time I drifted off. By late afternoon, I was jumpy. My breathing was shallow and my hands were shaking when I tried to hold a pen. I took a walk around the lake again, hoping to clear my head. I saw nothing unusual, no wildlife, no people, just the dark water and the muddy shore. When I returned, I prepared everything again. Flashlight, knife, camera, mirror. I locked the door. I considered blocking the window, but I needed to see outside. At midnight, the faces returned. They were clearer. I saw their eyes moving, their mouths opening and closing. I felt a vibration in the floor. I pointed the flashlight at the walls. The humming started again, louder and off-key. I gripped the knife. I stepped toward the wall. The humming sounded close to my ear. I held the knife out, but I felt nothing solid. The sound passed through the room. My heart pounded. My palms were sweaty. The door rattled slightly. I yanked it open and shone the light outside. Nothing was there. I closed it again, breathing hard. I realized my shirt was damp with sweat. The humming faded, replaced by a slow, dripping sound at the window. I turned and saw a single droplet of water running down the inside of the glass. I touched it. It was cold and smelled like the lake. I jerked my hand away. I checked the camera. It was still recording. I sat down on the cot, holding the flashlight and knife in my lap, and waited for sunrise. I saw the first strange light about a week after I started working the night shift at the old cemetery. It was a small, pale flicker near a row of cracked headstones. I remember turning my flashlight on it and seeing it vanish. I did not tell anyone about it. I did not want them to think I was nervous or weak. I decided to keep watching and not say anything. I had no idea what was coming. I work alone. My shift starts around 10 at night and ends when the sun comes up. There are no visitors after dark. The cemetery is surrounded by a tall iron fence. The gates stay locked. The ground has uneven patches of grass, old paths made of loose gravel, and a few mausoleums. The headstones are worn. Many names are hard to read. I carry a flashlight and a small radio that connects me to a security office a few blocks away. I do not get many calls. Nobody usually tries to enter the cemetery at night. That night I started my rounds at the north end of the cemetery. There is a long row of old graves there, some from the early 1900s. The light from nearby street lamps barely reaches that area. I use my flashlight to check for any signs of trespassers. I do not expect to find anyone. There are never any new burials. The place feels forgotten. The soil is dry, the air smells like dirt and old leaves. There is a slight breeze, and I can hear it passing through the fence. I walk slowly and check each section. My boots make a dull sound on the gravel. After about an hour, I begin to notice small pale lights again. They are not strong or bright. They move in a slow, uneven way, like someone shining a weak flashlight through a fog. I cannot see a source. They hover a few feet above the ground, shifting between the headstones. When I aim my flashlight at them, they fade or disappear. When I move the beam away, they seem to return. It makes no sense. I try to ignore them and continue my patrol. A while later, I hear soft sounds I cannot explain. It reminds me of voices, but the words do not form any language I know. They are low and muffled. I try to listen carefully. The sounds seem to come from the ground around the graves. I crouch near a headstone and hold my breath. I can hear something that sounds like whispers. They are too faint to understand. They do not sound like a radio or an echo, nor do they stop when I move closer. Instead, they grow quieter, as if shrinking away. When I step back, they rise again. It seems they argue or discuss something, but I cannot catch a single clear word. There is no obvious direction. The whispers shift from one place to another. It feels like they are all around me. I feel my chest tighten. My breathing becomes shallow. My hands grip my flashlight too hard. I try to stay calm and check my radio. There is no reason to call anyone yet. There is no intruder, no damage. Just strange lights and odd sounds. I walk along a row of tombstones, shining my flashlight over each one. The inscriptions are faded. The stone surfaces feel cold to the touch. My fingers are stiff and my heart beats faster than normal. As I reach the southeast corner of the cemetery, I notice shapes that were not there before. They stand about the height of an average person, pale and slightly transparent, with no faces or visible features. They look like silhouettes of human figures. They do not move like people. They seem to hover a few inches above the ground. Their arms hang at their sides. They stand still. I count 2, then 3, then 4. They are spread out among the headstones. I try to shine my light directly on one. As I do, the shape dims, like a shadow under a brighter light, and then it disappears. When I move the flashlight away, it reappears, as if the darkness allows it to exist. I don't know what to do. My heart pounds. My hands are shaking. I try to move closer to one shape, but as I get within a few feet, I feel a drop in temperature. The air gets colder. My skin gets goosebumps. The hair on my arms stands up. I feel the urge to back away. I can't see any eyes or mouth on the shape. I can't see any sign that it recognizes me, but I feel like it is aware of me. I step back. It remains where it is. The chain sound starts after midnight. It comes from somewhere behind me. It sounds like thick metal links dragged over dirt or gravel. I spin around and point my flashlight, but I see nothing. The sound moves away when I walk toward it. When I stop and listen, it returns, always just out of sight. I try to circle around to cut it off, but I find no source. The sound does not match anything in the cemetery. I know there are no workers at this hour. There are no tools left lying around. I check the gates. They are locked. I shine my light along the fence line. Nothing moves there, but I sense something watching me from outside, beyond the fence. It stays just out of the reach of my flashlight. I hear a faint rustling, but I cannot tell if it's the wind or something else. I walk back to my post in the small caretaker's shed near the center of the cemetery. Inside, there is a wooden chair, a desk, a lamp, and a window facing the rows of graves. I close the door and lock it. I sit down, turn on the lamp, and try to steady my breathing. My arms feel tense. I rub my face and try to understand what's happening. I cannot think of a normal reason for lights and shapes like that. I consider calling the security office, but I have nothing clear to report. They would ask if there is someone inside. I would say no. They would ask if there is damage. I would say no. They would probably tell me to stay alert and check again. I stand up and walk outside again. The lights are still there, drifting and pulsing between headstones. The voices are still whispering. The shapes are still standing among the graves, shifting around when I don't look directly at them. I walk slowly along a path toward the north side. My steps feel heavy. My eyes water from the dryness in the air. I keep my flashlight low to the ground. The gravel crunches under my boots. I try not to make noise. I try to listen carefully. The wind picks up a bit. It feels colder than before. I can feel the chill on the back of my neck. It feels like cold fingers pressing against my skin. I shrug and keep moving. The whispering grows louder as I approach a cluster of old graves near a twisted tree. The voices don't form real words. They're just low sounds, like distant muttering behind a wall. I try to find a pattern, but I fail. I shine the flashlight over each headstone. They are weathered and covered in faint moss. I try to wipe one stone clean with my glove, but the moss sticks to the surface. I give up and keep moving. When I turn around, I see one of those faceless shapes near the fence. It hovers close to a tall headstone. I move toward it, and it glides backward, staying just out of reach. When I stop, the shape stops. I try to circle around it. The shape moves to keep the same distance. I have a strange feeling in my stomach, like I shouldn't get closer. My breathing is shallow. My hands are sweaty. I consider turning on my radio and asking if anyone else has reported strange activity. Maybe someone else has seen this. But then I realize no one else is here. The security office would think I'm seeing things. I lower the radio and decide to wait and see if this stops on its own. I keep walking and reach the western side of the cemetery. The chain sound returns, closer now. I can hear it scraping against the ground. I shine my flashlight in the direction of the sound. I see a patch of gravel shifting slightly as if something invisible is passing over it. I step closer. The sound stops. I step back. The sound starts again, moving behind me. I spin around. Nothing. My heart is pounding in my ears. My teeth are clenched. It hurts. I look beyond the fence. There's a street out there with a few dim streetlights. Some parked cars, silent buildings in the distance. I can sense something behind the fence, but I cannot see it. I feel watched. I move closer to the fence, shining my light between the bars. I see nothing unusual, but I feel like something stands just outside the beam of the flashlight, waiting for me to look away. I hold the light steady. My arm gets tired and my neck stiffens. I stand there for several minutes, but nothing shows itself. I turn around and face the graves again. The pale lights drift among the headstones. The whispering continues. I walk among them, checking for any loose stone or fresh soil, anything that could explain the noise. I find nothing. The ground is old and firm. The stones are all decades old. I see no footprints besides my own. The shapes keep their distance. If I approach them, they fade. If I move away, they reappear. By now, my body feels on edge. I feel tension in my shoulders and neck. My back hurts, and my mouth is dry. I have not spoken to anyone all night. I try clearing my throat just to hear a normal sound. My own voice sounds strange to me in this silence. I say a few words to myself. Stay calm. Stay here. The sound of my voice makes me jump a little. I feel foolish. I move toward the caretaker's shed again. I check the time on my phone. It's only a little past 2 in the morning. I have hours until dawn. I don't want to stay cooped up in the shed, and I don't want to make a scene by calling for help. I try to think of a plan. Maybe I can walk the perimeter in a steady pattern. Maybe if I ignore these lights and shapes, they'll vanish. Maybe I can focus on something practical, like checking the fence locks or making sure no one has tampered with anything. I walk the perimeter, shining my flashlight along the fence line. The iron bars are cold to the touch. The lock on the main gate is secure. I check the side gate. It's locked too. I see no breaks in the fence. The street outside is quiet. A distant car passes, its headlights not reaching inside the cemetery. The whispering in the cemetery seems to react to the passing car. The voices grow softer when the car's engine hums by, and they grow louder again when it fades. I return to the main area with the oldest graves. The lights move slowly around me now. They don't dart away as fast. They seem more steady. I try to reach out with my hands toward one. I feel nothing. The air is slightly colder where the light hovers. My hand feels a weak sensation, like a mild electric tingling, but not strong. I pull my hand back and I try to get a better look. The light has no clear shape or center. It's just a pale glow, like a small area of dim light suspended in midair. The whispering and chain sound continue in the background. I cannot trace them to a single place. They seem to move around the cemetery at random. Sometimes the chain sound comes from behind me, sometimes from ahead. The whispers come from below, above, or behind the stones. I check inside one of the small mausoleums. The door is locked, so I shine my light through a vent. The interior looks empty and dusty, no sign of anything unusual. I listen. The whispers are muffled here, not as strong. As I walk back outside, I notice one of the shapes drifting closer. It stops about 10 feet away and hovers near a statue of a robed figure. I try shining my flashlight at it again. The shape dims, but this time does not vanish completely. I step forward. The shape stays there. I can see no eyes or mouth. It is just a smooth, pale surface where a face would be. I feel sweat on my forehead. My breathing is fast and shallow. My heart feels like it's pounding too hard. I step back. The shape follows me, maintaining the same distance. I raise my flashlight and wave it side to side. The shape moves around the statue to keep it between us. I walk left. The shape moves right. I walk right. The shape moves left. I feel like it is studying me, but I cannot be sure. My head hurts. My legs feel stiff. I decide to head toward the shed again. As I turn my back, I hear the chain sound behind me. I spin around. The shape is gone. The chain sound is gone. The pale light still drifts around, but now a few have moved toward the fence as if being drawn to something outside. I realize I've been clenching my jaw so hard that my teeth ache. I relax my face. I wipe my forehead with my sleeve. I walk at a steady pace toward the center of the cemetery. The whispering follows me. When I stand still, the whispers seem to circle around, moving from one cluster of headstones to another. Try stomping on the ground to see if it affects them. It does not. I kick a small rock. The sound of the rock rolling on the gravel is normal. The rest of the cemetery is not normal. I cannot explain any of it. I check my phone for the time again. About 3:30 in the morning. A few more hours until sunrise. I feel tired and tense. My shoulders ache. I consider calling the security office, but I realize I still have nothing concrete to tell them. Strange lights, whispering, shapes with no faces, chain sounds. They would not believe me. I would sound unstable. I decide to wait. Maybe when the sun rises, these things will leave. I spend the next hour walking in slow circles around the cemetery. I keep my flashlight moving, checking every corner, every row of graves. The shapes do not approach me again, but I see them drifting in the distance. The lights fade and return. The whispers do not stop. The chain sound appears and disappears. Occasionally, I feel something like a light touch on my back or neck, but when I turn around, I see nothing. The cold air makes my eyes water. My fingertips feel numb. By the time the sky starts to lighten, I feel exhausted. The pale lights begin to fade. The whispering grows quieter. The chain sound stops entirely. The shapes become harder to see as more light enters the cemetery. I walk to the fence and look outside. The street is still empty. I feel like the presence outside is gone. I cannot prove it, but I sense nothing there now. When the sun finally rises, I see nothing unusual. The graves are just stone markers. The wind is just a breeze. The ground is dry and quiet. I unlock the caretaker's shed, enter and sit down. My shift ends soon. I will leave this place to whoever comes next. I do not know if I will talk about this. There were no trespassers, no damage, no actual confrontation. Just a long night full of things I cannot name. I will return tonight and see if it happens again. I cannot avoid it. This is my job. I just hope the next night will be quiet. I doubt it though. After what I saw, I do not think these things are gone for good. They are just out of sight, waiting until it gets dark again. I can still feel the tension in my body, and I still remember the sound of those chains. It will be hard to relax now. I arrived at the farmhouse on a Monday afternoon. The sky was gray, and the wind felt heavy. I had 2 bags in my car and a laptop bag slung over my shoulder. I walked around the outside of the building before unloading anything. The walls looked old, with chipped paint and a few cracks near the windows. The front porch had loose boards and an uneven step. There were fields around the property, mostly tall grass and old fencing. A few trees stood farther out, twisted and bare. In the distance, I saw several scarecrows stuck in the soil, their straw faces tilted toward the horizon. I didn't pay much attention to them at first. I just noted their positions, 3 of them spaced wide apart. They looked ordinary enough. I had come here to get some quiet time for writing. I hadn't planned on strange events. That first evening, I carried my bags inside. The interior was simple. There was a small living room with a couch, a chair, and a short table. A kitchen was to the right, with an old refrigerator and a gas stove. There was one bedroom, small and cramped, with a single bed and a dresser. The bathroom had a shower and a sink that sputtered when I tested it. I walked through each room and flipped the light switches. Some bulbs flickered, others hummed. The floorboards creaked when I stepped on them. The door hinges squeaked. The entire house smelled a bit damp, like old wood after a rain. But I ignored it. I set my laptop on the kitchen table and arranged my notes. After unpacking, I went back outside as the light was fading. I leaned on the porch railing, which felt rough and splintered under my hand. I looked out at the fields. It was getting dark, and I wanted to see if anything looked strange. At first, it was all quiet. The grass swayed a little. The scarecrows were still standing where I had seen them before. I didn't see any movement. I heard nothing besides a faint rustling of leaves. Later that night, while I was inside typing, I heard a creaking sound. I paused and listened. The sound came from the front porch. It sounded like someone stepping on a loose board. But when I looked out the window, I saw nothing. The porch was empty, the sky was clear, and there was no wind. I waited at the window for a few minutes. The wood outside creaked again, even though no one was there. I opened the door slowly and looked around. There were no footprints. There was no one on the porch. I shut the door and locked it. When I sat back down, I noticed a faint dripping sound in the kitchen. I stood up and followed it. I checked the sink. It wasn't dripping. I checked the bathroom sink and shower. Both were dry. There was no rain outside. I checked the ceiling for leaks. It was all dry. Still, I heard a steady drip, drip, drip somewhere. I opened cabinets, checked corners, bent down and listened near the floor. The sound seemed to come from inside the walls. I couldn't find any source. After a while, I gave up. I tried to ignore it and went back to my laptop. I slept poorly that night. The bed was uncomfortable, and I kept waking up. I heard footsteps outside more than once, but I never saw anyone. In the morning, I walked outside to get a better look. The 3 scarecrows were in different positions. The night before, I remembered them facing the fields. Now one faced the farmhouse, another faced the road, and the last one stood with its head tilted down. I frowned and walked over to them. They looked ordinary, made of old clothes stuffed with straw, with hats pulled low over their straw heads. I touched one. It felt like old fabric and dry straw inside. I had no way to prove they had moved, but I was sure they hadn't stood in those positions before. I spent the afternoon writing. I kept the front door unlocked and a chair propped against it to make it easier to look outside if I heard anything strange. Around midday, I heard a low sound from the fields. It wasn't like a voice. It was a low humming or a heavy sigh. I opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The tall grass swayed even though there was no breeze strong enough to move it that much. The vegetation seemed to shift, as if something large moved under it. I squinted but saw nothing. I only saw the grass bending and straightening. The scarecrows were still scattered around, but I thought I saw one of them now leaning at an odd angle. I walked out a bit and approached it. When I stood just a few feet away, I felt the air get colder. My arms got goosebumps. The scarecrow's head was turned slightly toward me. I couldn't say if it had been that way a moment before. I reached out and nudged it. It was firmly anchored to a stake. I stepped back and went inside. That evening, I tried to ignore everything and focus on my work. I managed a few pages before hearing strange sounds again. First, I heard the porch creak. Then I heard a faint tapping against the door. I looked through the window. The glass reflected my face. Outside, I could make out the silhouette of a figure near the fence line. It was too far to see any details. It looked larger than a man with a hunched back and long arms. It moved between the trees and disappeared behind them. I stood there for a while watching. I didn't see it again. Later that night, as I sat in the living room with the lights on, I noticed something outside the glass door at the back of the house. It was a face pressed against the glass. I jerked back and almost fell off my chair. The face was pale and slightly transparent. I could see the shape of eyes and a mouth, but it was blurry like fog. It stayed there for maybe a second, then it faded. It left a patch of mist on the glass, like breath, but it vanished fast. I ran to the door and pulled it open. There was nothing there. I stepped onto the small back step and looked around. The grass was still. There were no footprints in the dirt. The night was quiet. I slammed the door shut and locked it. I tried to sleep, but the dripping sound inside the walls kept me awake. Around midnight, I got up and walked around the house with a flashlight. I checked every corner. I banged on the walls. I listened carefully. The dripping never got louder or softer. It stayed the same steady beat. I found no puddles, no damp spots. I gave up and returned to bed. I tossed and turned, hearing faint footsteps outside and the porch creaking again. I heard what sounded like claws scraping against wood. Once I heard a low groan, not human, more like a heavy object moving. When morning came, I checked the scarecrows again. This time, one of them had moved closer to the house. It stood near an old wooden post about 20 yards from my front porch. Its straw head seemed angled upward, looking at me. I felt my stomach twist. I stared at it for a minute and then walked right up to it. It felt the same as before: dry straw, old clothes, a stick holding it upright. I grabbed its shoulder and tried to pull it out of the ground. It was stuck firm. I didn't have the strength to yank it free. Frustrated, I went back inside and paced around. I decided to set up a test. I brought out my phone and tried to record video at night, placing the phone in the window with a good view of the fields. I hoped to catch the scarecrows moving or something else. I also stacked chairs and a table against the doors. I didn't want anything slipping inside. I made sure all windows were locked. Then I sat down in the living room, the lights low. I waited. I tapped my foot and felt sweat on my palms. My breathing got shallow when I heard the porch creak again. I grabbed a flashlight and aimed it through the window. The boards were bending slightly, but there was nothing on them. I heard a scraping sound along the wall outside. It sounded like branches dragging, but I saw no branches touching the walls. When I went to check the back door, I saw the same pale face on the glass again. This time it lingered a bit longer. I saw hollow eyes and a thin nose. The mouth was closed. There were no features that stood out, just empty shapes. I felt a hair on my arm stand up. My heartbeat got fast. I aimed the flashlight at it. The face didn't react. It just stayed there, pressed against the glass. I yelled, "Who's there?" It didn't move. I pressed my hand against the door. The glass felt cold. Suddenly the face was gone. I flung the door open. Nothing. Silence. I slammed it shut. I tried to call someone, but my phone had no signal. I tried walking outside to get a signal. I stood by my car and raised my phone. Nothing. The fields were quiet. The scarecrows seemed farther away. The shape I had seen in the distance was gone. I didn't see any footprints. I tried to calm down. I decided to spend the rest of the night awake, waiting for sunrise. I sat in the living room, sipping water, listening. The dripping sound came and went. Sometimes it sounded as if it were right next to me, other times it faded into the background. Around 3 in the morning, I heard a deep sigh outside again. It was long and heavy. I stood by the window and peered out. The grass was shifting again, as if something was underneath it. I couldn't see any shape, just the movement of the blades. They bent in waves that moved toward the house and then away from it. I checked the recording on my phone. It showed nothing. The scarecrows appeared in the same place, not moving. The fields looked empty. I watched the video several times and saw no movement. I felt frustrated and tired. My head hurt. I decided I needed some daylight to think straight. In the morning, I walked around the property. The dew on the grass wet my shoes. The scarecrows stood where I remembered them, but their positions looked off. One's arms were raised higher than I remembered, and another's hat looked tilted differently. I touched them again. They felt normal. I walked along the fence line. The trees were quiet. The ground was soft in places, hard in others. I found no footprints. I checked the porch steps. Nothing. I looked under the porch, just some dirt, cobwebs, and old leaves. I spent the next day checking the farmhouse itself. I opened every closet, every drawer, and every cabinet. I found old tools, some cleaning supplies, a few old blankets. Nothing strange. The dripping sound was still there. I even tried turning off the main water valve. The dripping continued anyway. I banged on the walls. Dust fell, but no water. I tried looking in the attic. It was empty except for some old boxes. Dry floorboards. No leaks. On the 4th night, I slept for a few hours. Around midnight, I woke up sweating. I sat up and listened. The porch creaked again. This time it sounded like someone pacing. I got up quietly and moved to the window. The boards dipped and rose in a slow pattern. I couldn't see anyone. I shone the flashlight. The boards stopped moving. I turned the light off. After a moment, they started creaking again. It felt like a game I couldn't win. I felt a tightness in my chest. I clenched my jaw and stepped back. I stayed inside. Later I saw a movement near the fence line. I recognized the shape I had seen before, a hunched figure, large and awkward. It ran between two trees. Its legs looked long. Its arms hung low. It moved fast with no sound. I swallowed hard. I stood behind the window, holding my breath. It ran back and forth a few times, then disappeared into the darkness. At some point, I dozed off on the couch. When I woke, the sun was rising. The air inside felt stale. I opened the front door and stepped out. The scarecrow that had been closest to the house was now gone. The stake was still there, but no scarecrow. I walked to the stake. There were no scraps of straw, no fabric on the ground. I turned around, scanning the fields. I spotted the missing scarecrow near the edge of the property, standing next to the other two. Now there were three again, together. All of them faced the farmhouse. All had hats pulled low, arms stiff at their sides. I realized I was shaking. My legs felt weak. I decided to pack my things. I didn't want to be here at night again. I didn't care about finishing my writing. I threw my clothes into my bag, grabbed my laptop, and locked the door. I walked to my car and put everything inside. Before leaving, I looked at the fields one last time. I saw nothing unusual. The scarecrow stood still. The grass barely moved. The porch was quiet. I heard no dripping. The windows reflected the morning light. I got into the car and started the engine. I drove off. I watched the house shrink in the rearview mirror. I stayed alert for anything moving among the trees, but saw nothing. I left the farmhouse behind with its creaking boards, silent sounds, shifting scarecrows, and silent faces. On the road, my phone regained signal. I didn't call anyone. I just kept driving. I kept my eyes forward, not looking back. I didn't want to remember the slow creaks, the cold glass, or the faint sighs in the fields. I kept my hands steady on the wheel and moved on. I locked the door behind me and stood still for a moment. My room was on the 4th floor of an old building in the historic center of the city. The room felt cramped. The floorboards under my boots felt uneven. The wallpaper had small cracks, and the ceiling had these raised faces, carved or molded into the stucco. There were about half a dozen of them. They had empty eyes and thin lips. At first I thought they were just decorations. I had seen plasterwork like that before in old hotels or guest houses. But these faces seemed different. Their eyes looked a bit too deep, and when I stepped under them, I felt as if they were following my movements. I tried to ignore them and tossed my bag on the bed. Outside, the windows faced a street full of old ruins. I had seen them during the day, just piles of old stones and arches with moss. There was nothing special about them, but now in the late evening, I could hear high-pitched voices coming from somewhere near those ruins. The voices seemed to chant something without any tune. I moved closer to the window and looked through the narrow gaps. The glass was old and dirty. I couldn't see anyone outside, just dark shapes of broken walls and old columns lit by a weak streetlight. Still, the voices sounded clear, like a handful of people whispering and singing at the same time. I couldn't catch any words. It sounded more like a continuous whining or humming. I stepped back and tried to focus on something else. The bed was small. The mattress felt stiff. There was a single chair in the corner and a tiny table against the wall. The room smelled like old books and dusty curtains. I decided to check the walls. I don't know why. I guess I wanted to feel more settled, to know if the building was solid. When I put my hand on the wallpaper, I felt something very odd. There was a slight vibration or small pulse. It was steady. It felt a bit like touching a weak heartbeat. I held my breath and kept my hand there for a few seconds. The sensation didn't go away. Every part of the wall felt the same. Wherever I placed my palm, I felt that faint rhythm. It made me uneasy. I pulled my hand back and shook it, as if I had touched something warm and alive. I glanced at the ceiling again. The faces did not move, but I felt watched. My throat was dry. I pressed my lips together and tried to focus on practical things. I checked my watch. It was around 10 p.m. I was tired from traveling and just wanted to rest. I turned on the small lamp by the bed. The light was weak and flickered a bit. I decided to wash my face. The bathroom was at the end of the hall. I unlocked the door and stepped out into the corridor. The wooden floor creaked with every step. I did not see anyone else. I did not hear any doors closing or footsteps. Just silence. When I reached the bathroom door, I turned the knob and entered. The single light bulb inside was dim. The sink was old, stained with rust around the drain. I turned on the faucet, expecting cold water, but the water came out lukewarm, almost like body temperature. I splashed some on my face anyway. It felt uncomfortable, but I needed to wash off some sweat. The back of my neck was damp. I patted myself dry with a small towel I had brought from my room. Before leaving, I listened. I couldn't hear any voices out here. The corridor was silent. When I got back to my room, I locked the door again and put a chair under the doorknob. I wasn't sure why I did that. I guess I felt safer. I sat on the bed and looked around. The ceiling remained the same, the faces staring down. The air felt heavier now. It was harder to breathe. The window was closed, and only a thin breeze came in through the old frame. The chanting outside had changed. It was quieter, more distant. I could still hear it, but it sounded weaker, like it was moving away or fading. I was glad it was quieter. However, the silence inside the room was not comforting. Though, my ears rang a bit as I tried to focus on small details. The pattern of the wallpaper, the shape of the door handle, and the cracks near the floor. I decided to lie down. I kept my boots on. I rested my head on the thin pillow. The mattress springs felt stiff under me. I stayed like that for a while, staring at the ceiling. The faces up there seemed to have slight shadows around their eyes and mouths. I wondered if the flickering light was causing that. I checked the lamp. The bulb was steady now, with no flicker. So, the shadows must have been caused by my own angle of view. I tried to ignore it. I closed my eyes. I tried to calm down and rest. After a minute or two, I felt something. A slight movement, very subtle, as if the bed frame had shifted by half an inch. I opened my eyes. Nothing seemed different. I listened carefully. Nothing. I reached out and touched the wall again from where I was lying. I felt the same pulse. I pulled my hand away quickly. The floor creaked, even though I hadn't moved much. My heart was beating faster. I told myself to relax, that the building was old, and it was natural for it to have strange noises. I must have stayed there with my eyes open for a long time. When I looked at my watch again, it was nearly midnight. The air was getting hotter. I sat up and tried to open the window a bit more, but it was stuck. I pushed harder. The frame rattled, but it would not move. I gave up. I walked around the room, wiping sweat from my forehead. The door was still locked. The chair was still under the knob. I considered leaving the room and going outside, maybe finding a cafe or bar that stayed open late. But the building's front door was probably locked by now, and I didn't feel like wandering around empty streets. The city center was old and not very busy at night. I stood by the wall opposite the bed, feeling the surface with my fingertips. The pulse was still there. I pressed harder. The wallpaper bulged slightly under my hand, as if there was something soft underneath. I pressed a bit more. I felt a gentle resistance. I pulled my hand away again. My stomach felt tight. I breathed through my mouth and tried not to panic. I sat down again and looked at the ceiling. The faces seemed to be looking down with more intensity now, as if their eyes had become darker. I knew they were just plaster and paint, but my mind kept telling me they were interested in me. I turned off the lamp, hoping that darkness would help. Without the lamp, I only had a bit of light from outside. The room looked darker, of course, but the outlines of the faces were still there, and my eyes slowly adjusted. I regretted turning off the lamp, because now I couldn't see clearly. I turned it back on. The bulb hummed softly. That was when I noticed a faint scratching sound coming from the far corner of the room near the floor. It was like thin nails scraping on wood or plaster. I froze and listened. The sound stopped. I took a few steps forward. Nothing. I considered the possibility of rats or insects. Old buildings often have pests. I could deal with that, but then the sound started again, and it was higher, closer to my shoulder level. I backed away and stood near the door. I turned my head toward the noise, trying to pinpoint it. It seemed to move along the wall. I followed it with my eyes, but I saw nothing. The wallpaper did not move. The plaster did not crack. It was just that sound, like soft scratching. My breathing grew shallow. I felt sweat running down my back. I reached for the doorknob. I wanted to get out. I removed the chair. I turned the knob. The door opened fine. I looked into the corridor. It was dark. Only a weak light came from the far end, where the bathroom was. I stepped out and listened. The corridor smelled like old wood and stale air. No one was there. I thought about going downstairs to the lobby, but I had not seen anyone at the reception desk since I checked in. I was also worried I might not find my way back if the lights were off. I decided to stay on my floor. Maybe I could sit in the hallway for a bit. I sat down on the floor outside my room. The floorboards were cold. I leaned against the wall and tried to calm down. The corridor was quiet. After a few minutes, I realized I felt exposed out here. I couldn't see all the way down the hall. There were corners and closed doors. Anyone could come out of a door at any time, and I would not know who they were. I got up and returned to my room, closing the door behind me. Locked it again and put the chair back under the knob. Inside, it was still hot and stuffy. The faint voices outside had started up again. They sounded like they were chanting something else now, but still tuneless and sharp. I looked through the window cracks again. I saw nothing but the ruins and the dim light. I pressed my ear against the glass. The voices sounded closer like this, but still no words, just tones that rose and fell. Then I noticed the ceiling again. It was hard not to look. I could swear the faces had changed slightly. Their mouths looked a bit open now. I felt a wave of nausea. I didn't want to stare, but I couldn't help it. I squinted, trying to see if maybe my mind was playing tricks. The plaster did have lines that suggested parted lips. The shadows made it look worse than it was, but I couldn't shake the feeling that these faces were focusing on me. I tried moving around the room, watching if the eyes seemed to follow. When I moved to one side, I thought I saw the angle of one face's eyes tilt slightly. But when I looked again, it was just the same carving. The scratching noise returned this time behind me. I spun around and saw nothing. The wall was smooth, cracked wallpaper and old paint. I wanted to touch it again, to feel if it still pulsed, but I was afraid. Instead, I banged my fist lightly against it. The sound was dull. After a few seconds, I placed my palm flat against it. The pulsing was there. It felt a bit stronger now. My fingers tingled. I yanked my hand back. I stood in the center of the room, breathing through my mouth, trying not to think about anything except what to do next. The air felt thick in my throat. My shirt stuck to my skin. I wiped sweat from my forehead and decided to try to sleep. It was late, and I figured if I could just close my eyes and rest, the morning would come soon enough and I could leave this place. I turned off the lamp, lay down on the bed, and closed my eyes. I couldn't sleep. I kept opening my eyes every few seconds. My mind kept expecting something to move or make a noise. After a while, I heard a faint tapping near the window. I stayed in bed and listened. The tapping grew louder. It sounded like fingertips against the glass. I sat up and looked. There was nothing there, just the shape of the window and darkness outside. I crept toward the window and touched the glass. It felt warm. I pressed my ear against it. The chanting was still going on outside, distant and thin. Then I saw something move at the edge of my vision. I turned quickly toward the wall next to the door. A faint shape pressed against the plaster, like a set of thin fingers poking through. The plaster bulged outward in narrow lines, and I heard a soft crackling sound. Though it didn't break, the surface stretched. I stepped back, my heart pounding. The shape disappeared as soon as I moved closer, so I reached out and touched that spot. The wallpaper felt damp, and I jerked my hand away. I backed up until I hit the opposite wall, feeling weak in my legs. The idea of sleeping now seemed impossible, so I stayed up, pacing back and forth, occasionally checking the door. I tried to open it and leave again, but every time I looked at the hallway, it felt empty and unwelcoming. At least here, I could watch all four walls in the ceiling at once. As time passed, I heard more slight noises, scratching, tapping, soft knocking. Sometimes the plaster bulged as if something pushed from inside the wall. Once I thought I saw a pale hand shape slide along the surface, fingers splayed wide. It made no sound except a faint rubbing. I never saw it break through though. The wall held. My mouth was dry and my breathing was shallow. I felt dizzy at times and had to sit down. Every minute felt longer than the last. My watch said it was around 2 a.m., so I pulled out my phone. No signal. I tried calling for help anyway. Nothing. I shouted a few times, yelling for anyone in the building. No one answered. My voice sounded small in the closed room. I stayed near the door, listening to the hallway. I heard a low humming sound from outside the room. I didn't know if it was a machine or wind. It didn't help me relax. I kept looking back at the walls. The bulges came and went. Sometimes I saw a long, thin finger press against the plaster. Once I heard a quiet scraping, like nails on the other side. My chest tightened each time it happened, and my muscles felt stiff. Hours seemed to pass. I tried to ignore the walls by focusing on the ceiling. The faces still looked down. Their expressions didn't change again, and I couldn't stop feeling that they were aware of me. I turned the lamp back on and off several times, testing if the light made any difference. It didn't. At some point, the chanting outside faded away completely. I looked out the window and saw a hint of light in the sky. It must have been close to dawn. The tapping and scratching slowed down. The plaster stopped bulging. The walls felt solid again. I tested them with my palm. The pulse was weaker, barely noticeable. I still felt tense, but there was a slight relief knowing the night was almost over. I waited until the sky outside turned lighter. When I could see the ruins clearly, I decided it was time to leave. I didn't bother packing my bag neatly. I just grabbed it and opened the door. The hallway was empty, but now I could see more in the early light. I hurried down the stairs and reached the lobby. No one was at the desk. I opened the front door. It was unlocked. Outside, the air was fresh. I stepped out and kept walking until I reached a main street. I looked back once and saw the building standing there quiet and old. I took a deep breath and kept moving. I decided to find another place to stay. I didn't care how far I had to walk. I arrived at the old ballroom just before midnight. With me was a small backpack containing a flashlight, a pen, a notebook, a thermos of coffee, a sandwich wrapped in paper, and a folded blanket. I stood outside for a moment. The front doors were wooden and covered in dust and scratches. The handle felt cold. I turned it and the door opened without resistance. Inside, the air was stale. I noticed a few candles and holders along the walls. They were already lit. I didn't know who lit them, and I hadn't seen anyone else around. The candles produced a dim, flickering light. In the corner, an old gramophone played a slow piece of music. The sound was thin and hollow. There was no one near it. I closed the door behind me and took a few steps forward. I walked across the center of the ballroom. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet. They made a low, uneven sound that changed pitch as I moved. It reminded me of someone whispering just below the surface of the wood, but I didn't let that idea settle. The air smelled like old fabric and furniture polish. There were mirrors along the walls, the glass stained and dusty. I saw shapes in them that did not match my own movements. When I stood still, I saw pairs of figures in the reflections moving in slow circles. They looked like dancers, but I could see that they did not touch the floor. Their feet were a few inches off the boards. Their faces were pale and blurred, and their clothing looked old-fashioned. They turned together, and their hands were raised as if they were following a silent choreography. I heard the gramophone's needle scratching over the record. The track did not change. It just repeated the same slow tune. I checked the device. There was no one there, and the handle did not move. The record spun in a steady loop. I leaned closer. I saw no mechanism that would cause it to reset. I left it alone and turned back to the center of the room. The candlelight created shadows that shifted on the floor and walls. I saw no chairs or tables. It was just an open space, dusty mirrors and these strange reflections. I looked over my shoulder. The door was still there. I wanted to be sure I could leave whenever I decided to. I tried the handle. It did not move. I pulled harder. It felt locked. I pressed my shoulder against it. It did not budge. I decided to remain calm. I took my notebook out and tried to write down some notes. My handwriting looked shaky in the low light. I noted the time, a little after midnight. I described the room, the candles, the music, and the reflections. I left the notebook open on the floor and took a careful walk around the perimeter. I touched the walls. They felt solid. The paint was peeling, and some of the mirrors had cracks. I tried to wipe one with my sleeve. The dust smudged, but I could still see those pairs of figures spinning slowly. They did not react to me. They just danced. I stepped back and listened. Aside from the music and the quiet creaking of the floor, I heard nothing. I said hello out loud, but no one responded. I felt a light pressure on my arm. It felt like a hand resting there. I turned my head. There was no one beside me. I pulled my arm back. The pressure did not remain. My skin tingled. I did not feel any pain, just a gentle push or tug. I tried stepping forward. My foot caught on a loose board. I bent down and ran my fingers along the floor. The boards were uneven. I could feel the edges of some planks raised higher than others. I stood up and noticed that the dancers in the mirror had slowed down, their heads turned in my direction. I felt something tighten in my chest. I breathed in deeply. The air tasted old and dry. I wanted to explore the corners of the ballroom. There was a back wall covered by a heavy curtain. I approached it and reached for the fabric. It felt rough and stiff. I pulled it aside. Behind it, there was a long corridor leading to a smaller room. I did not see any furniture. The corridor was dark. I used my flashlight. The beam was weak, but I could see the peeling wallpaper and dusty floor. The smell was stronger here, reminding me of rotting wood. I took a few steps and heard my footsteps echo. When I turned back to check the main room, I saw the mirrors at an angle. I could still see those dancers. They moved in slow circles as if they were caught in some endless pattern. I returned to the main area, not wanting to lose my orientation. I placed my backpack near the door, took out the thermos, and drank some lukewarm coffee. I didn't feel hungry, so I kept the sandwich wrapped. I stood near the gramophone and listened. The music repeated the same melody. It seemed stuck. I felt a slight vibration beneath my feet, as if someone was tapping from below. I stepped aside and pressed my ear to the floor. I heard a faint rustling sound. It made my scalp tighten. I backed away and rubbed my arms. My palms felt sweaty and my neck felt tense. I glanced at the mirrors again. The dancers moved at a steady pace now, raising their arms and lowering them. They turned their heads to the left, then to the right. I couldn't see their features clearly. Their bodies looked transparent. I stood close to one mirror and tried to see if they had eyes. I couldn't make out any details, just blurred shapes that resembled people dressed in old suits and long dresses. I waved my hand at them, but they didn't wave back. They just followed their steps. I checked the corners of the room for anything that could explain this. There was nothing, just the candles, the gramophone, and the dusty air. After about an hour, I felt a sudden drop in temperature. My breath came out in short puffs. I rubbed my hands together. The music kept playing. I moved closer to one of the candles. Its flame flickered as if disturbed by a breeze. I didn't feel any airflow. The windows were closed. I tried one of them. It wouldn't open. Its latch was stuck. The glass felt cold and solid. I pressed my forehead against it, hoping to see outside. I saw only darkness and the faint outline of some trees. I tapped the glass. There was no echo, just a dull sound. I heard the floor creak behind me. I spun around. No one was there. I took a step forward and stopped. I smelled perfume. It was a scent that didn't come from me or my belongings. It smelled like old flowers and something bitter. I coughed. I felt something near my face. I leaned back. There was no visible figure. Yet, I sensed a presence. I reached out a hand. Nothing touched my palm, but I felt that subtle pressure again on my arm, as if guiding me toward the center of the room. I followed it slowly, my steps careful. The floor creaked each time I moved. When I reached the center of the ballroom, the music sounded a bit louder. I noticed that the dancers in the mirrors had stopped. They hovered, motionless. Their arms were raised. I stared at them, waiting for something to happen. After a few seconds, they started moving again, but this time their movements were faster and less graceful. I heard a scraping sound near the gramophone. I glanced over. The handle was turning on its own. The record wobbled. I stepped towards it. The music crackled and skipped. I tapped the side of the gramophone. The needle jumped. The music paused, then resumed the same melody. I knelt and tried to find a switch or lever. I saw none. The device seemed old and simple, just a horn, a turntable, and a needle. I touched the horn. It was cold metal. I lifted my hand and felt no vibration. Yet the music played and I could hear it clearly. I backed away. My heart felt heavy in my chest. My legs felt stiff. I noticed that when I breathed, my chest felt tight. The silence between the notes was thin. There were no outside sounds, no wind, no cars, no birds, only that repeating melody. I decided to try the door again. I grabbed the handle and pulled. It didn't move. I tried pushing, no luck. I kicked the door and the sound echoed. I searched my backpack for something to pry it open. I had a small pocket knife. I tried to wedge it into the frame. The blade slipped. I cursed under my breath and tried again. The door frame felt solid. The blade scratched some paint off, but nothing else. I wiped the sweat from my forehead with my sleeve. I returned to the center of the room. The dancers in the mirrors were now circling faster. Their feet never touched the floor. I watched them spin. Their movements were repetitive, but their timing was off. They would jerk or slow down at odd intervals. I heard the boards beneath me creak with each step I took, even when I stood still. I looked down at my feet. I lifted one foot. The wood creaked anyway. I felt my skin crawl. I crouched and pressed my hand to the floor. It felt solid, but I sensed a subtle vibration, like something shifting below. I stood up, took out my notebook again, and wrote down what I had observed. I noted the temperature changes, the strange reflections and smells. I wrote down the feeling of invisible pressure on my arm. I detailed the locked door. The pen's ink flowed smoothly. My handwriting looked shaky. My fingers felt cold. I flipped through the pages. I had written several lines already. I placed the notebook down, took the thermos, and drank more coffee. It tasted sour now. I took a small bite of the sandwich. The bread was dry. I swallowed and felt it scratch my throat. Time passed slowly. The gramophone continued playing the same tune. The candles burned low but did not go out. I pulled my blanket from the backpack and wrapped it around my shoulders. I paced around the room. I tried different windows. None opened. I tapped on the walls. They felt solid. I listened at the cracks in the panels. I only heard faint sounds, like distant footsteps. I shook my head, trying to stay alert. My eyes felt heavy. I forced myself to keep moving. I stretched my arms and legs. My back ached. After what felt like several hours, I noticed a slight change in the room's lighting. The candles seemed to fade, and I saw a thin line of light through the windows. The music sounded slower. The dancers in the mirrors moved less often. They seemed to drift apart. I walked to the door once more and tried the handle. This time it turned with a loud click. I pulled, and the door opened. Outside, the air felt fresh. I stepped out and looked around. The sky was lighter. I could make out the shape of nearby trees. I turned back and looked at the ballroom. The candles were still burning, but dimly. The gramophone still played, but the sound was weaker. I couldn't see the dancers in the mirrors from this angle. I stepped forward again, reaching for my backpack. I wanted to leave nothing behind. I picked up the notebook, the thermos, and the blanket. I looked at the gramophone and decided to leave it. I walked out, and the door closed behind me. I tried the handle from the outside. It didn't move. I stepped away, breathing the morning air. My chest relaxed. My legs felt steady again. I looked at the old building. The windows were dirty and still closed. The walls showed peeling paint. From outside, I heard nothing unusual. I saw no one around. I stood there, holding my belongings. Listening to the quiet morning, I swallowed hard and walked away. I didn't see any figures following me. I didn't smell perfume anymore. The pressure on my arm was gone. I felt a stiffness in my neck and shoulders, but I kept walking. I thought about the locked door and the repeating melody. I thought about the dancers floating in the mirrors. I gripped my notebook tightly and kept going. I didn't look back again. I just left. I pushed open the attic door around midnight. I had been awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the strange noises in the house. The landlord mentioned that the attic was empty, just a few old boxes and junk. I wanted to settle my nerves and see what was up there. The narrow staircase creaked under my feet. The door handle felt cold and rough. I used my flashlight because there was only one small bulb in the ceiling, and it was weak. When I stepped inside, I smelled dust and stale air. My nose twitched. I saw a few cardboard boxes against the far wall, some old chairs, a broken dresser, and a pile of newspapers. In the center, facing the window, I found an old rocking chair. It looked solid, made of dark wood with a curved back and armrests that were smooth from years of use. I walked closer. The chair's seat was covered in a thin layer of dust. There were small scratches along the legs and armrests. I wiped my forehead with the back of my hand. My shirt clung to my skin. It was hot and still. I shone the flashlight along the floorboards and under the chair. Nothing unusual, just dust and a few spider webs. I stood there for a moment, confused about why I had felt so nervous downstairs. The place looked ordinary. I moved around, nudging some boxes with my foot, trying to see if there were signs of mice or something else that might have caused the noises. Everything was quiet. I decided to head back down. I took a last look at the rocking chair before I left. For a second, I thought I saw it move. It was a slight shift, maybe the floor settling. I paused, holding my breath, and stared. It stayed still. I shook my head and left the attic, pulling the door shut behind me and locking it. I returned to my bedroom and tried to sleep, but I couldn't. Around 2 a.m. I heard a faint creaking sound. It was soft at first, then a bit louder. It sounded like wood rubbing against wood. I sat up in bed, my heart beating fast. The sound came from above. I grabbed my flashlight and headed for the attic again. This time my steps were quicker. I just wanted to see if something had shifted. Maybe a window was loose, letting in a draft. At the top of the stairs, I pressed my ear against the attic door. The creaking was steady. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The chair rocked back and forth. The rest of the attic was still. I felt sweat forming on my forehead. My hands shook. I pointed the flashlight at the chair. It slowed until it stopped. The air was heavy. I felt pressure on my chest. I walked towards the chair, my shoes scraping the floor. The chair stayed still. I leaned in and examined it. I saw no strings, no wires, nothing that would explain the movement. I lowered myself onto one knee and tried pushing the chair gently. It rocked easily. The hinges on its curved runners squeaked. The sound matched what I had heard. I waited. Nothing else moved. I stood up and backed away a few steps. I felt stupid. It was just a chair. It couldn't move on its own. I turned off the flashlight for a moment to test the darkness. The small bulb in the ceiling gave off a weak glow, and there were no open windows. The air was still. I turned the flashlight back on, took one more look, and went downstairs. I tried to sleep again. An hour later, I heard it again. The same creaking. I cursed under my breath and went back to the attic. This time I kept the light off as I opened the door. The sound was clearer now, a steady back and forth rhythm. I crept in quietly. The bulb above cast a dim light over the chair. It rocked by itself, slow and steady. I swallowed hard. My stomach tightened. I gripped the door frame to steady myself. I thought about some reason for this. Wind. Something under the floor. Vibrations from the street. Nothing made sense. The house felt silent. I took a step forward. The chair stopped. My scalp tingled. I stepped back. The chair started again, rocking softly. I stepped forward. It stopped. I did this a few times. Each time I moved closer, it stopped. Each time I moved away, it started again. I stood in place, my heart pounding. I thought, if this chair can move on its own, maybe it can sense me. I didn't speak. I only thought about it. I imagined myself asking, "Can you understand me?" The moment I formed that thought, the chair rocked harder, the wood scraping against the floor. My chest tightened. I didn't want to say anything out loud. I didn't want to hear my own voice in that place. I tried thinking something else, something simpler, like stop. The chair slowed and then stopped. I felt my fingertips grow cold. I backed toward the door. My breathing was shallow. I thought, rock again. The chair tilted forward and backward, making a rough sound. I felt a wave of dizziness. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes for a second. I opened them and stared at the chair. I asked in my head, "Who are you?" The chair rocked violently, the squeaking louder and uneven. I felt sweat running down my face. My heart thumped in my ears. I didn't get words, I didn't get an answer, just that violent movement. I took a slow step forward and reached out my hand. My arm shook. I touched the chair's backrest. The wood felt cold, colder than the air. A sudden chill ran from my hand up my arm. I yanked my hand back. The chair stopped rocking. I heard something. It was a quiet sound, like a muffled chuckle. It was low and short, and I felt it in my gut. I looked around. The attic was empty. No one else was there. I took a step back, breathing through my mouth. My tongue felt dry. The chair was still again. I thought, "What do you want?" The chair rocked slowly. The movement was gentle, but the squeaking sounded rough. I felt the hair on my arm stand up. I waited. The chair kept moving. I tried another question, thinking it clearly. "Why are you here?" The chair rocked harder, and the squeaking turned into a louder creak. I clenched my jaw and held my breath. I wanted to leave. I turned and stepped towards the attic door. When my foot touched the top stair, the rocking stopped. I paused with one hand on the doorframe. I didn't think anything. I just stood there. After a few seconds, I allowed myself a thought. I'm leaving. The chair didn't move. I hurried downstairs and locked the attic door behind me. The next night, I couldn't relax. I paced around my bedroom, checking the time. Near midnight, I went back up. I carried a small lamp with me and plugged it into an outlet in the attic so I wouldn't rely on the ceiling bulb. The lamp cast a bright white light. I stood a few feet from the chair and looked at it closely. I could see small cracks in the wood, places where the finish had worn off. I saw old stains and marks. The chair was well built, but old. I rubbed my eyes and listened. The attic was quiet. I thought, move. The chair responded by rocking once. I jumped a little. My heart rate spiked. I felt sweat on my lower back. I tried something else. I thought, move harder. The chair began to rock faster, making the same sound as before. I lifted my hands in front of me, fingers spread. I tried not to move closer. I wondered if it was reading my mind somehow. I tried asking something more complicated. Tell me what you are. The chair rocked so violently that it scraped across the floor. The noise was loud and unpleasant. I stepped back, covering my mouth. The smell of dust rose from the floor as the legs dragged. I coughed and backed up until I felt the wall against my shoulders. I swallowed. My stomach hurt. I pressed my hand against it. My legs trembled. I tried smaller questions in my head. Can you hear me? A gentle rock. Are you alone? A slower, uncertain movement. Do you want me to stay? The chair rocked harder. My ears rang. My eyes watered. I felt trapped. The attic felt tighter. My chest felt heavy. I tried to breathe slowly. I leaned over, resting my hands on my knees. I stared at the floor and saw the dust swirling around. I stood up straight and looked at the chair again. It was still now. I decided to touch it again. My heart pounded in my throat, but I stepped forward. The floor creaked under my weight. When I reached the chair, I placed my hand on the backrest. The cold shot through my arm again. I jerked my hand back. That same muffled laughter filled my ears, lasting a second or two before fading quickly, leaving me breathing hard and fast. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. My fingers trembled. I looked around the attic, searching for anything else that might explain this. I opened a few boxes, found old clothes, a broken vase, some yellowed papers, nothing interesting. I turned back to the chair. It stayed still, facing the window. Outside, I saw only darkness. I waited, thinking about what to do next. I thought, I'm not afraid of you. The chair rocked gently, as if mocking me. I felt a wave of heat in my face. I swallowed again. My throat felt tight. I decided to see what would happen if I asked a more detailed question in my mind. I thought about something complicated. How did you come to be here, and what keeps you tied to this place? The moment I finished thinking, the chair slammed back and forth. Its legs pounded the floor. The sound echoed. I stumbled back and bumped into a pile of boxes. I felt dust on my tongue. My heart raced. I thought the chair might break itself, but it didn't. After a few seconds of violent rocking, it stopped dead. I heard another short laugh. It was closer this time, louder. My scalp felt tight. My breathing was rapid and shallow. I grabbed my lamp and held it like a shield. The tension in my body was so strong that my muscles ached. I didn't want to ask more questions. I just wanted to know if I could leave and never come back. I thought, I'm going now. The chair remained still. I took a step toward the door. Nothing happened. I took another step. The chair didn't move. I let out a slow breath, turned, and left, locking the door behind me. I went to my bedroom, lay on the bed, and stared at the window until morning. During the day, I tried to forget about the chair. I stayed out of the attic. I opened all the windows in the house, aired out the rooms, wiped my forehead whenever I thought about it. That night, though, I couldn't resist. I needed to know if it would happen again. I returned to the attic, holding a stronger flashlight. I didn't turn on the lamp this time. I just stood in the doorway, shining the beam at the chair. It sat there, silent and motionless. Dust motes drifted in the weak light. My ears rang in the silence. I swallowed hard and focused my thoughts. Are you going to move tonight? The chair rocked once. I felt sweat under my arms. My hands shook, making the flashlight beam tremble on the wall. I stood there, not moving closer. I tried another question. If I leave you alone, will you leave me alone? The chair rocked with a quick, sharp movement. I felt a chill crawl over my skin. I had no idea what that meant. I pressed my lips together and tried to slow my breathing. I waited a long time, just staring. The chair stayed still. I could feel something in the air, something cold and tense. I knew it would respond if I asked something else, but I didn't want to. I felt weak and tired. I took a slow step back. The floor squeaked. I kept my eyes on the chair. It didn't move. I stepped back again out of the attic door and closed it. I locked it and held the key in my hand. The metal felt warm. I went back downstairs. I sat on the couch in the living room, staring at the dark TV screen. I heard no sounds now, just silence. In the following nights, I tried to ignore it. I stayed away from the attic. Sometimes I heard faint creaks, but I told myself it was just my imagination. I focused on sleeping and forced myself not to think when my mind began to wander. When I caught myself thinking too much, I pushed the thoughts out of my head. The chair didn't stop existing, but I refused to visit it. The attic door remained locked. I kept the key in a drawer where it collected dust. My chest still felt heavy sometimes. I still remembered the cold feeling of the wood and the strange laughter, but I stayed downstairs. A week passed. I didn't go back up. I spent most nights lying awake, sweating, listening for creaks. Sometimes I thought I heard faint movements above me, but they never lasted long. When a complicated question formed in my mind, I felt a tension in the air, but I refused to form the words clearly in my head. I tried to think of nothing. I tried to keep my mind calm and empty. The chair never came down. It never touched me again. It stayed up there. I still feel uneasy in this house, but I haven't returned to the attic. The dust, the silence, the cold wood, and that muffled laugh remain in my memory. Sometimes I hear a creak in the night, but I don't go check. I close my eyes, then hold my breath until it stops. I don't know if the chair is waiting. I don't know what it wants. I just know that it's there, rocking in the darkness, feeding on my unease and fear. I try not to think. I try not to ask. I do nothing. I wait tense and quiet, hoping it will stay where it is.